So while that gets rolling, I'm going to put up the title screen. And we are now streaming on YouTube, I can see. And I will pull down the title screen in about 1 minute, Mrs. Roy.
Okay.
And I want to just check real quick if the captioner would like to start, just so I can see it again. Because I'm not seeing the captions. Let me take it off share. Oh, there it says I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm going to wait 15 seconds and see if the I'm ready shows up on the YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, I see the I'm ready. So it is, you can start, Mrs. Roy.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Alachua County Workshop of June the 2nd, 2020. The first thing, I'm going to ask Mr. Moore if he would like to explain to the public how to weigh in when it comes to citizen input.
I'm looking, hold on.
Jennifer, you're not muted. Thank you, Mrs. Roy. I have the agenda up right now, and I'm about to put the phone numbers up as well. Obviously, we do have the email address that is offered. We did not receive any emails today for today's meeting, and we went ahead and used both numbers that we used during the regular meetings. And so those are 955-7613 or 955-7544. Either one can be used to call in. And if it just rings or you get voicemail, just try back again. It just means they're helping someone else.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, one more. Because the YouTube is about 20 seconds behind, just be prepared that if you're ready to call, you know, as we start getting there, don't wait. Go ahead and pick up the phone because there is about a 20-second delay. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. And just to say that there will not be input on individual topics until citizen input from citizens. Okay, we'll jump right in with the budget update from Mr. Rella. Mr. Rella, are you ready to go?
I am. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get my.
Oh, that's all right. I just want to make sure you heard me.
Can everyone see this okay?
No. There you go.
Okay. So I was actually thinking a little bit on the way in, and I've been involved in preparing the district's budget and or approving it for 14 years. And just when you think you've seen everything there is to see, you get a global pandemic that brings the strongest and longest standing bear market this district is this country has seen to its knees. So it's very, very, very interesting times. A lot of uncertainty. I did want to give the board an update on the budget. There's a lot of stuff going on clearly that is gonna impact our budget. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on where we're at. We have been working, outside of the bonding and the COVID-19 response and everything else. We have been behind the scenes, still working diligently to prepare the district's budget. So when we get to July, the board will have a balanced budget and feels comfortable and has been informed. So did want to kind of look quickly at the agenda. I will say We did make some adjustments to this from what I sent the board and reported out on Friday. There was a couple slides that relate to the sales tax forecasting in terms of revenues that we're going to be covering in the facilities meeting. Obviously, I didn't want to cover them twice, so we pulled those out. In addition to that, we did receive some additional guidance on the CARES Act funding and what that might look like. So I did add a slide on that within this presentation, but we're going to look a little bit at our 1920 response and how we intend to close out the year. Obviously, the implications on COVID-19 on next year's budget, a little economic update, update on the legislative stuff that passed that relates to budget, and then we'll look at the actual budget itself and insurance, the insurance renewal. So closing out this fiscal year, obviously we're in a different kind of place than we would be any other year. Just seems like overnight we went from brick and mortar to distance learning. So we did want to kind of let the board know some stuff that we did. I'm sure most of this stuff is not news. Nonetheless, wanted to let you know, based on the potential economic impacts of COVID-19 that we'll discuss later in this presentation, we did have a hiring freeze effective March 31st on all positions for this year. Subsequent that, we have opened it up for instructional for next year. However, the non-instructional, we have not been posting positions. Obviously, that's going to save us some funds, at least in the short term. We also froze all non-essential spending effective March 31st, so the same day. Essentially, what we were looking for there is if it's not something you absolutely have to have for this school year, then we don't need to buy it. I mean, that's the bottom line. We need to have a reserve in place so we can kind of weather the storm. Substitute services, obviously with Kelly Services, if there's no in-person learning, there's no substitutes, so we definitely save some funds there. We're looking very closely at closing out purchase orders we feel can be closed out at this point. Utilities, I mean, clearly the biggest driver of our utility spend, particularly with the sewer and water, is having our kids there. We don't have 27,000 kids flushing the toilet 3 times a day, so we anticipate some pretty significant savings for utilities. And then also in terms of not having our buildings occupied for the electricity, we anticipate some savings there. We did make some adjustments to the middle and high school teacher ratios. We've been historically allocating those on a 21.5 for middle and a 24.5 for high school student per teacher ratio. And what we did is we increased that to 22 and 25, and that aligns with the class size reduction amendment. So we should be fine there. Obviously, all out of county travel has been suspended. The fuel costs, there's definitely savings there. You know, we are running routes, but not nearly at the same kind of clip that we have been. I think we probably got on any given day 20 to 25 as opposed to 130 or somewhere in that range. And the price of diesel has obviously been really good. So that's, you know, kind of where we're at is, you know, we want to increase our fund balance for these one-time, you know, costs we're avoiding, and that would give us a little bit of padding for next year. So the implications of COVID-19, this is obviously what everyone's talking about at this point. So every district in the nation in Florida, you know, at this point, we've got more questions than answers. You know, I can tell you we're working real hard on plans to reopen, financial planning and things of that nature, but it is extremely fluid at this point. I think by the time we get to July, things should be a lot more definitive in terms of what we're looking at financially. And then, you know, what does the conditions look like for reopening? Obviously with the COVID-19, it's a little different or a very different situation than previous recessions. I mean, there's no real playbook for it. You know, with the Great Recession, in terms of modeling financial impacts, you could look at any of the, you know, 10 or 12 recessions that have happened before that to kind of get a feel for the different economic indicators that will let you know when, you know, how long and how deep the recession would be. With this one, there's really no model. We essentially just shut the lights out overnight. So we have, you know, obviously learned a lot of lessons from 2008, and we have a good work group together with finance officers, and we're all dealing with the same stuff and sharing ideas and sharing thoughts. Another thing that's been brought to my attention is in 2008, the state obviously has always been very reliant on the sales tax receipts, but actually more reliant now than they were in 2008. So that's a big concern. State unemployment has increased from 4% in March to 13%, which is a massive jump, and actually higher than the peak of the Great Recession. We received a little bit of guidance on the CARES Act funding. We have not received what we really need to make any kind of decisions. And of course, the superintendent, executive staff, and my team are working diligently behind the scenes to make sure we're in a good position next year. So the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, this is something that's been discussed a lot. We're starting to get some good information. From what I hear from the state level folks, the release of a full plan is imminent. And there's a couple pieces we're missing that we have to really work through. Obviously, at the federal or countrywide level, $13.2 billion for K-12, $14 billion for higher ed, and $3 billion for governors. The state is holding back of our $13.2 billion. They are holding back 10% for administrative costs. So that gives us, and this is just really preliminary allocations. They were developed based on our Title I allocation methodology. That's just an estimate. They'll firm those up and give us a little bit more guidance. But according to that estimate, a little over 6.8 million would be the total countywide allocation. And of course, we have to share it with the charter schools, and we have to share it with the private schools. In terms of the charter schools, I can get a pretty good reasonable estimate for that. For the private schools, until they give us some kind of guidance on that, it's going to be difficult to know how many kids are in our private schools, because that's not really reported widely. So in terms of these funds, there's 12 total purposes you can use it for, and I've kind of summarized them as best I could here. Number one, and kind of the overarching thing, is to make sure we're maintaining our operations and make sure we can continue to function and we're paying our employees and such. A few of the categories included emergency response for supplies, whatever districts need to offer a safe environment for kids, emergency preparedness for planning, professional development that will assist teachers during this time, student technology for devices, student mental health services, addressing the needs of low-income students, whatever that they would need. Pretty broad category there. And then summer and supplemental learning programs. And I hear, like I said, that the release of the full kind of documentation is imminent. There's also going to be an application process, so it's not going to be like the AARA funds that we got in the Great Recession, where it was like, here's $7 million, just use it for these purposes. There's going to be an actual formal grant application, so that's going to take some time, certainly, for us to work through, and definitely some due diligence. We did receive, and this is something we've been kind of waiting for and anticipating, is the revenue data for the month of April. Obviously, with March, we shut down everything. I think it was around March 13th. So you had that kind of like partial month of what I would consider relatively normal expectation for revenues. And you had the other half of the month, that was when we were kind of shut down. The March data was actually up a little bit. I think that was, and this is just speculation, but I think that was due to, in part, to people really going to the store and stocking up. I know everyone knows they stocked up on toilet paper, but all kinds of supplies kind of in preparation for the pandemic. So for the month of April, which is probably our best, in terms of understanding the depth of this, the best month, April, and certainly May will come into play in terms of what that looks like. So for the month of April, the sales tax receipts statewide were down close to 600 million, which obviously is a big chunk. And that represents 24% reduction in what was anticipated. There's also a very significant reduction in the corporate income tax. From what I understand, with talking with the Department of Revenue that I think they suspended the corporate income tax, or gave businesses an extension. So the anticipation is those, it's a really huge jump or drop percentage wise, but the anticipation is we'll see those kind of come in as we get closer to closing out the year. So overall, 878 million under our estimates for the month of April. And then, we'll have May data at the end of this month. And then based on that, the EDR, well, I'm sure Amy Baker's already working away to try to figure out what this looks like going forward. They're going to have revenue estimating conferences like they normally would, and those are going to be kind of incorporated into the planning process for the legislature. So those kind of conversations are going to be ongoing, but this is the most recent data we have. And it does show a pretty significant 24% reduction. Obviously, we're starting to see the economy reopen, so maybe April and May are particularly bad, but I think, we should see some growth going forward. And we'll talk about some modeling we did for the sales tax and the facility slide that'll give you a little bit of information on where we think we might end up. So for the state level budget, this is just their general revenue. And I just wanted to point this out. Like I said before, the state is extremely reliant on sales tax. You can see 77% of their general revenue is directly from sales tax, another 8.4%. So basically 85% are coming from those two tax sources. So it is very responsive at the state level. Their budget is very responsive to economic conditions, as you would kind of anticipate. So this is kind of the worry. The biggest funding source they have is taking a major drop. What does that look like going forward? And this slide is just kind of looking at the different budget categories. Obviously, health and human services, the healthcare piece is the largest, but a lot of those funds are from federal sources. I would kind of put your focus on the second column that has the revenue, the general revenue. So that's like the state's actual money that they raise and can distribute. State for the education, it's 17 billion, and health and human services 10. So basically, we are a huge portion of the state revenues in terms of their general revenues that they distribute. And I can tell you back in 2008, when they did cuts, we received over 50% of the cut went directly to schools. And when you look at this slide, it kind of makes sense because, over 50% of their revenue is going to us. So I would just keep that in mind. When we see cuts, we will get the lion's share unless they change their practices or policies in some way. Just a legislative update. So it was, I will say, and Brian can concur, it was a pretty slow year legislatively. There wasn't much stuff. It was kind of big stuff, but we haven't seen the volume, or we didn't see the volume this year that we've seen in a lot of previous years. So that's good and bad. I did highlight a few of the things that I think are most important in terms of financial impacts. The private school vouchers, in my opinion, are probably the most significant threat to public education at this time. The family empowerment scholarships, which essentially allows students to go from regular public K-12 to private schools and take the funding with them. They did make some adjustments to that to kind of expand the program. They increased the enrollment from 18,000 kids statewide to 47,000 kids statewide. And then they also increased the enrollment year over year by 1% of the overall student enrollment of the state. So with that kind of methodology, we're going to see this program expand significantly over the next years. And that's just something that this board and other boards are going to have to kind of be aware of for this year. I think it was $890,000 that we paid out on these scholarships to private schools. And I'm anticipating that number at least doubling for next year. We'll have to see, but just as an estimate, I think it's going to at least double. The PICO is for next year. The charters were allocated $170 million in PICO maintenance. And obviously, again, this year, nothing for traditional K-12. The funding amount, though, is significant enough to cover their allocation, so we wouldn't have to contribute or share any of our 1.5 mil funds if they did not um, contribute or allocate enough of the PICO funds. We would have to share our 1.5 mil funds. So I guess it's good and bad. It would be nice to get some, but at least we're not having to share our 1.5 mils. One of the biggest pieces this year was the FRS system, the FRS retirement rates. And I think I've shared this with the board in previous meetings, but they changed some actuarial assumptions with the rate of return on the investments. And essentially what that did was increase the actuarial liability. And to cover that liability, they are increasing the regular class rates significantly. It's over 1.5%, which is huge. We're usually somewhere in the 20 to 50 basis points kind of range. And this is just a huge bite to take at one time. We pushed back really hard during the legislative process to get this split over multiple years. And we thought we were getting some traction, and that we didn't get traction. So we're hoping maybe this is something that the governor would look at, delaying a year or two based on the economic conditions. It's a 30-year liability. You don't need to do it all in 1 year, but that's what they've done. So hopefully the governor can step in, if not about $2.5 million additional costs for us. Also, just wanted to point out the special risk class. So this is your first responders, police, sheriff's office, paramedics. Their rates actually went down 1%, a little over 1%. So just wanted to point that out. We only have one special risk employee, but for them, it will provide some relief for their budget.
Mr. Rella,
Yes, ma'am.
did they, any indication why their rate went down and the regular risk went up?
I asked our lobbyists that, and we really can't figure it out. They must have changed some kind of assumption somewhere, whether it's it has to be because in terms of what the actuary looks at, they're looking at the demographics, mortality rates. I mean, you understand that stuff. So it had to have been something that was changed of, the retirement, the number of years it takes to get to retirement or something. But I honestly did not get a very clear response from anyone on that. But that's something I plan on looking into.
Thank you.
But I was very interested in that question.
Well, it's shocking because they have a higher multiplier and they work fewer years. So I'm shocked that their rate went down while the regular risk increase was higher. That you would think it would have been the opposite way.
Right.
But,
yeah, I'm going to do some research on that one, and we'll see if we can get you an answer. The big one from this year, and this is something everyone's obviously heard of at this point. It's was kind of the war cry for the governor, and obviously got traction in the House and Senate. But the teacher House Bill 641 was the teacher increase allocations, teacher salary increase allocation. It's a new categorical program, really designed to get the beginning teacher pay up across the state to $47.5. So our total allocation for the district is $4.9 million. Obviously, we have to pass through funds to the charters. So that gives us kind of the funds to work with, around $4.6 million. It excludes substitute teachers, and what the allocation does, and it's, this is something that our finance officers are really starting to think through. During the legislative session, I played around with it a little bit, but I got the impression that the potential was, after the COVID-19, this is something that might be line item vetoed, and it does not appear that that's going to be the case. So this allocation is something that's going to take a lot of careful thought between staff, the board, and the union to kind of come to the best plan for the district. But basically, you have to take 80% of the funds and use them to increase the minimum base salary for each instructional employee to $47.5. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to do that. It'd be very easy to do some permanent damage to our unintended consequences on our salary schedule. So that's something we're going to be thinking through. And then the 20% can be used for the more experienced teachers and the higher end of the salary schedule. And then it also repealed the Best and Brightest program, which was used to kind of fund in part this allocation. So the FTE, this is something I always bring to the board. It's the biggest driver of our costs and also our revenues. So it's really important that the board kind of understands and sees this. You can see through the years, the blue is projected, the red is actual. Obviously, you want to hit your projection or exceed it. We did that this year. It was very close, but we did manage to add some kids in survey 3, and we are above our projection. That's, of course, where you want to be. I would say this is probably one of the biggest concerns we have for next year, and we all share it. Like when we get to the first day of school, what is it going to look like? Are we going to have 2,000 less kids? I mean, those are the kind of potentials that this virus, and when you look at, the economy, but you look at the psychological aspects of, returning all of our kids to school, there's definitely some concern. I could tell you, staff is really working hard to push the e-school, to give options to kids so we can kind of retain those FTEs. But the reality is there's definitely a potential that we could lose some students for next year, but that's something we'll continue to monitor. I know we talked a little bit about kindergarten roundup last night, so we've rolled that out, and hopefully we can get all these kids, the students enrolled, and we don't have a big mass exodus, but that's obviously going to take a lot of planning on our part, and we're working on that now. So the budget itself has not been signed by the governor. I know it's on his desk. I hear he will sign it any day, but there's an anticipation that he will sign the budget as it exists for the FEFP. I know there's been a lot of discussion about line item vetoing a bunch of different pieces in there, like the Florida Forever, the raises for state employees and different stuff like that. We should be able to shake that out within the next month or so. One thing I just wanted to point out that I think is kind of interesting. You're hearing a lot from different people, obviously Bill Montford and other leadership of the Senate and House, that they will approve this, or they feel like this budget will be approved and the revenue shortfall will be made up with the CARES Act funding. So when I kind of think through that, I'm thinking if they leave our budget and our FEFP the way it is, and they give us the CARES Act money, how are they replenishing their reserve? How are they addressing their financial issues at the state level if they're allocating all those funds? So I think it's realistic. They approve this budget as is. We go through the election cycle. We see a special session where they reduce our allocation by the amount of the CARES Act funding. I think that's a real possibility. So those are kind of considerations we're going to have to think about. But I think, in general, at this point, this is what we know. We know we're getting CARES Act money. We know the governor is likely to approve this budget. So I did want to walk you through it quickly. And this should be familiar certainly for all the board members. The base student allocation, additional $40 per student. They did adjust our district cost differential up, which is good. Additional 220 unweighted FTE and an additional 330 weighted FTE, which is about 1%. And then they're estimating our tax roll to go up 4.8%. We did receive a preliminary tax roll from the property appraiser, and it was less than that. So we'll get a certification from the property appraiser within the next month. So we should know kind of exactly what that's going to be. And then, we've continued to see the reduction in the required local effort down another 0.223 for next year, but they will adjust that. Like I said, once they get the actual the certified tax rolls, they will adjust all these numbers and our budget. This is like the main portion of our FEFP. You can see the base student allocation based on student growth and the additional 220 kids. We're looking at a base student increase of a little over 3 million. The adjustments to the categorical, so I should mention all the categorical funding sources that were restricted in terms of spend are highlighted in blue. The ones in white, we have a little bit more flexibility with. So digital classrooms going down 162,000. The Safe Schools funding is obviously going down, $3,000 for next year. Some additional mental health funds, and I think we've put some additional employees on that for social workers and such to get ready for next year. The Best and Brightest obviously is getting removed, and then some other adjustments. And then you can see down at the bottom, the teacher salary increase allocation of 4.9 million. So overall FEFP, $5.1 million increase for next year. And then we add in the required local effort, 63 million. The class size reduction lottery gives us total state funding of 147.8 million. And then the discretionary potential discretionary millage and required local effort together. So total potential funding, 224 million. That assumes that we hit our FTE projection. I do not think that's necessarily realistic, but we're going to do our best to kind of maintain those students. So overall funding increase on this budget based on our projection is $6.4 million increase, which is a little under 3% for next year. So this is a slide I always kind of go through when we get these funding increases and folks see that we get an additional $6.5 million. And while that seems great, but then when you kind of look at it from a financial perspective and include all the other factors, it's never what that bottom line is. We've got 6.4 million, 4.9 of that's going to teacher salary increases. We have no really say in that. Best and Brightest, obviously we're going to get a credit back on that because that's been eliminated. And then, additional funds into mental health, other categoricals, the family empowerment scholarships are increasing. There's going to be an increase of workload for the students. Obviously, if we have 220 more students, we have to provide services for them, transportation, instructional, et cetera. And then the FRS rate increase, which is a budget buster for many districts, is $2.5 million. So you're really looking at net, when you net all that stuff out, a little over $1 million decrease in funding, which is about $35 a student.
Can I talk to you, Alex?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know when we went over this when it first came out, it looked like we could balance it, but I didn't put in the student workload. So that's the difference in the $1 million. And then we said 7%. I didn't calculate the charter schools. So, what I also heard is that, maybe the state's going to save some money too, like we did. That came out, I mean, just recently, a little while ago. You saw that, didn't you?
I have not seen that, but I mean, it would not surprise me to hear that.
Yeah, well, that'll help them too, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So, like I said, when I just did the figures, I came up with 7 million for the CARE Act. But then again, that was just, doing ratios. So, we were in pretty good shape considering the FRS. If they could just split that FRS maybe into 4 years, that would help. That'd be the best lobbying we could do probably. So, and then until now, after we cover the 80% that raised the lower, the minimum wage, it's still, I think, left about 2% for salaries. Did you figure about like that for these experienced teachers?
We're still kind of working on that. One thing I will say,
That's what I came out with.
Yeah, I'll work on that during the summer. One thing we're kind of seeing, which does not help the budget, is we're seeing record low attrition. Obviously, it's good to have experienced teachers and experienced staff in there, but when they do leave, we replace them with less experienced teachers, which are less expensive. And from an educational perspective, maybe that's not the best situation, but from a budget standpoint, it helps us every year balance the budget.
It's like a step that's never cost money, but it could cost money, you're saying.
Yeah, based on what I'm seeing is a lot of people, and I don't necessarily
Well,
understand.
actually, it saves money, but then that's money. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't necessarily understand the middle aspect of it, but there's a lot of people that aren't retiring that are thinking about retiring, and my fear is, we release our plan to reopen, and then we have 50 teachers retire in August or late July. Well, that's going to be a real problem. So we're hoping that that's not the case. We're hoping everyone comes back. But I just wanted to mention to the board that, the attrition that we typically see, we are not seeing. So from a budgetary standpoint, that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with.
It'd be interesting because I don't see, you say in one way about the Great Recession. The Great Recession was a tremendous hit to the school district. We lost $36 million in 1 year. If you remember that, we went from general fund went from 201 million to 165. So hopefully this, we'll see what happens with this. But up until this pandemic, we were kind of, I thought it was better than what I expected. But we'll see, right?
We'll see. I mean, there's definitely some glimmers of hope out there. I mean, when you look at our cases, at least locally, they've been in single digits for, knock on wood, for I think almost a month. So we're hoping, we can really get things going economically, of course, in a smart way. I mean, that's why you see, the governor and his cabinet, they're really pushing the reopening because they see the economics, and we all do. We see the economics of this situation, and the more it's protracted closure, the economic impacts are going to be devastating. So I think kind of on the right track with getting things rolling, doing it smart, doing it in phases.
It'd be interesting, the governor with the salaries, because that's his baby.
That's his baby. So I don't see that going away. But that's something I know people were talking about.
Yeah.
So.
And the idea of the sales tax, that's what I've been saying about the required local effort. They don't want to. They've taken a funding formula that was based on property and reduced it to where it's based on sales tax, and it was vulnerability is showing. Unless I'm wrong, am I right?
No, I mean they're definitely right about that. Their approach gives them very little wiggle room in terms of, if you're not going to raise property taxes and your sales tax go down, then your revenues go down, bottom line.
No, they were just not raising them, they're reducing them.
Yeah, they're reducing them.
To the point of, it's scary. All right, okay. That's all I had to say. Like I said, I forgot about putting in the student workload, and then I guess it's the extra students, yeah. All right. Thank you.
So another really big cost driver for the district is insurance. We do have an insurance committee that kind of looks at this and does analysis. The last 3 years have been particularly bad in terms of our claims. You can see 2017-18 claims increased of over 3 million in terms of a percentage. That's really, really big. Claims in the 2019 year were less, but they were still pretty significant. And we're having difficulty with our rates in terms of renewals catching up to the funding. And we're still not there yet. But I wanted to give the board an update. We did make some significant changes. As you can see, the 1 year trend 6%, but the 3 year trend is 12%. And we're still kind of playing catch up a little bit. So we've developed and approved. The insurance committee has an 8.2% renewal. We'll talk about that in a second. But at the bottom, you can see the graph of the fund balance. We were building. And then I think in 2016, we made, we set, or it might've been 17, we set a target fund balance of 12 million. So it's a really delicate balance to try to maintain an appropriate fund balance, just like it is the general fund. Try to maintain that balance and provide services and the cost of the board. It's kind of a delicate thing to juggle, because you don't want too much in the reserve, because then you're not, freeing up funds for board priorities, superintendent priorities, but you don't want to underfund it. And right now, based on that trend for 17, 18, and 19, we had to make some changes. They were difficult, but I think, we came to a pretty good conclusion, and we'll kind of share that with the board here. Some things we looked at, obviously the target, the fund balance is 12 million. We have to have a minimum of 6 to maintain our certification with the OIR. We looked at potential employee cost share, increases in deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. So those are the kind of things we looked at. In terms of a historical rate renewal, average from 2000 to 2012 was around 11%. I know we had a couple of years that are huge. Over the last few years, that we kept them under control. I would say there's some districts that have seen multiple years in a row of double digits, and still having fund balance issues. So we are, I think that committee is pretty committed to doing what needs to be done, because we have to maintain the benefits, but then also, from the fiduciary side, we got to make sure we're funding those claims appropriately. So this is what we looked at. Historically, or at least the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a $750 deductible plan and a $1,500 deductible plan with an HRA contribution by the board. So the changes we made for this year, or I'm sorry, for the 2021 plan year which will take effect in January, we increased the out-of-pocket maximum on the 750 and 1,500 plans from 4,000, 4,000, 8,000 to 5,000, 10,000. And then the other change we made on the $1,500 deductible plan was decreasing the HRA contribution from $750 to $500. And then what the committee, the sentiment of the committee, and I, of course, was a big proponent of it, is we've got to get something, or do our best to get something that's affordable for families. Like if you're a single teacher with 2 kids, it's really difficult to pay for our insurance. We wanted to provide something with a little bit higher deductible, but that would be a really good benefit for our employees that do elect the family coverage, but then also hopefully bring in some of those families that maybe want to do the family coverage but can't afford it, and bringing in, obviously historically children are much lower costs to the plan than people that are 50 and up and such. So if we can bring in some more of those healthy employees to the plan, and younger employees, we feel like that will really help. So what we did is we created a higher deductible plan. So it's a $2,500 deductible plan. And let's see. And we kept the out-of-pocket deductible to $4,000 and $8,000. We lowered the primary care physician copay from 25 to 20. And then at the bottom, you'll see the health reimbursement account is essentially $500 per dependent or per plan member, up to $1,500. So if you have a family of 3, you would get $1,500. Family of 2 would get $1,000. So we feel like that, will really help those families with the out-of-pocket expense piece, and provide a little bit better benefit.
Alex?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, you know how I feel. And we did keep the $1,500 deductible free for everybody, but I still would I'm still a little bit about the copay. And it's, I would at least like to see them have the same copay as people that were giving $500. You can get $1,500 if you're married and have a child, correct?
Right.
500? Yeah, so that's a good deal. I understand. We need to get healthy young people in. We also need to take care of our most vulnerable. I've been saying this forever. True?
Yeah.
Hi, I want to make sure but a little bit, I'd like to see something to help him. Just cost it out. I'd like to see what the copay, if you lower it to the same as the one with the $2,500. At least that. something to show them, because they're going to have to make a decision between the 750 and the 1500. And just something there's not anything new that I've been saying to you, right?
Right.
No surprise. It's just I want to take care of our ASPs and our most vulnerable. So that's what I want to say. That's what I want to say about that. Okay.
All right. I think the important piece here is we're still providing, with a $1,500 deductible plan, a free, no employee costs product to our employees that work more than 20 hours a week. There's not many districts that do that. It's definitely.
I know that, and that's why I said I don't want that going up any higher than that. But the trouble is, I also would just want to see what would it cost, say, with a $20 copay. That's all.
We'll look at that.
Information, and I'm a happy camper.
We will take a look.
All right, thank you.
So this is kind of what the plans look like on a per employee basis. The top section is our current rates, and then the bottom section are the rates for 2021. You can see the board contributions the same across the board. The employee contribution for the 750 plan obviously is $25, and then you can see for the dependent coverage on the lower section of this, you got it for the 750 for the employee spouse is $436, and then for the 1500 is $364 and $334 for the 25. So it's definitely more affordable for our employees, and then the employee children is $276. We feel like that's going to be really good. The good news is we make tweaks every year. So if we don't see the migration we want to see, we don't see the contributions and stuff that we anticipate, then we can always make adjustments later. And of course, we'll take a look at the copay for that plan as requested.
And it gives us a $500. We're just increasing the board's contribution by $500, right?
Per year. Yep.
Which is compared to most people. I remember back in the early 2000s, we had a 35% increase one year. Just to put things in perspective.
Right. Luckily, I wasn't here to budget for that.
No, you weren't. How old were you? No. All right, that's good.
No comment.
Thank you very much.
With that, that's kind of all I had at this point. Like I said, we're working diligently behind the scenes. We will be bringing stuff to the board over the next, obviously, month and a half. And I will entertain any questions, anything the board would like to see on the next round of workshops, anything that you would want to see. Obviously, want to make sure everyone's comfortable with it. So if there are any questions or comments or direction from the board, I'd love to hear that.
When are you starting bargaining? I know with everything going on, that's kind of a tricky question.
I think we've kind of kicked off our internal meetings in terms of salary. We obviously need to see which way things are going with our student counts and the budgets. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns at this point that would make me a little uncomfortable when negotiating now. But obviously, we'll kick those off as soon as it's, I think, in the next month or so, and then
it'd be interesting to start working on the salary schedules. That could be done.
It would be. It's actually,
I
I've
don't want
already
to go
started.
through last year, remember? And we need to get different plan. Start seeing what would work. Because besides one, we also have master's degree people that kind of go up to 47,000. That so it's a lot to work on. So anyway, if we could just get together and start doing that. I know you're busy. A lot. I'll fiddle faddle with it. I like doing that stuff. All right.
Me too.
All right. Talk to you later.
Is there any other kind of feedback, anything that board members want to see on the next presentation?
Just wanted to say thank you very much, you and your department. Very thorough presentation, and your job is not boring. Always new balls in the air to juggle. So thank you for being on top of things and serving the needs of our children and district.
Alex, I had one question that I would like to ask you to go back. I was trying to write the numbers down. You said that you all increased the um, student allocations between the middle and high school. Would you give me those numbers again, please?
So the statutory class size ratios are 22 for middle school and 25 for high school.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, we've allocated 21 and a half for middle school and 24 and a half for high school to give us a little bit more wiggle room.
Okay, and so you're going to go to the 22 and what the state statute is what you're saying?
Correct.
That was one question I had. And then a few weeks ago, Superintendent Clark mentioned in her that she wanted to bring back this position. I can't recall principal something. I can't recall exactly what it is. Can you tell me how we're paying for that? Is that going to come from general fund, or will the schools that are fragile schools be required to give money from their allocation to pay for that position?
So to answer your question, we're really still working through staffing. Obviously, we've had a lot going on, and both Karen's schedule, my schedule. In terms of the budget process, we're still on schedule, but we do have some things to kind of work through. That's one of them that we've just discussed on a preliminary basis. But I unfortunately I can't answer that question at this time because we haven't settled that yet.
Please, in your next presentation, make sure that you make a note to note that if I don't recall to come back to it, okay? I'm making a note. I have made a note in here, so I want to know how we're going to pay for that.
Absolutely. So we'll do on my next presentation, whenever we get that scheduled, we'll do a full review on staffing and actually look at the budget at that point.
Okay. I have one other thing. I was looking at the health insurance rates, and I don't have health insurance with the district. My husband carries us as he has for a number of years. And I'm wondering, have we as an organization, I know we have the health insurance committee. I've heard Dr. Paulson just speaking on that. Have we looked at possibly joining with or possibly pooling resources with the county and all? They have much better rates for family coverage, I understand. And we don't have to go back over, we give free coverage for anybody who works 20 hours a week. But I'm just wondering if we've thought about looking at that. The county is self-insured and they have a plan that their out-of-pocket is not nearly as much as what I just saw on the screen there.
So we have not had any discussions, or I personally have not had any discussions with the county. Obviously, we've talked to them about joining their health clinic program and expanding that. So I anticipate, when we kind of start the health clinic discussion, I would love to sit down with their staff and, if we could pull together, I mean, I think they've got 2,000, maybe 2,400 lives. We've got, I think, around 6. So when you pull those together, it really helps. We would lose some control over certain things, but that might make sense. And that's certainly something I would entertain.
Dr. Paulson mentions wanting to protect vulnerable people. And I'll tell you, my husband pays for family coverage. It's less than $300 a pay period. It's 26 pay periods, but it's less than 300. We have no deductible. We have a hospital deductible, but there's no deductible on just medical care. We have a copay. I think it's $25 for primary care, and then it's scheduled out for specialists. So I only bring it up because it would be a benefit to our lowest paid employees. I mean, to all employees, but especially those, our ESPs that are the lowest paid, and they can have a health insurance policy that they could use. It wouldn't be one that they could just say a name that they have and they can't afford to use, because I think I shared with my colleagues in past sessions that at my former job, I worked with a lady. She came on shortly before I left my job, and she said she had worked in the cafeteria and she had the free coverage for herself and her children on the floor of kid care, but she couldn't afford to pay the deductible to use her health insurance. So I just thought I would just share that with everyone. It may be something, because there's sometimes local governments do go in together and form some kind of co-ops. I think City of Tampa and Hillsborough County, I think they have the medical clinic and all where they go on. So I don't know all the particulars in it, but I'm just thinking it may be something that we look into.
Well, can I ask a question of you? Now we have a copay there. They don't have to. They can use the copay to go to the doctor. You don't have any. They don't have any deductible
We have a hospital deductible. It's $500 if you have an admit or an ER visit, but no deductible on like X-rays and things like that. None of that. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, we have co-pays that 750 has co-pays.
Yeah.
The X-rays, that's one of the things we don't have in the 1500, but there is a deductible.
No, we only have deductible.
When I look at the plan, it won't say any deductible.
Nope.
All right, okay.
Prescription meds, none of that. There's a copay for prescriptions, a copay for primary care, a higher copay for specialists, but there's no deductible. Now, if you have a hospital admission or an ER visit, there's a deductible for that.
Okay, and specialists have a copay, okay.
I'll definitely do some research on my end and see what they offer and how that kind of sizes up with what we do.
And that's on top, and if you go to the medical clinic, you don't even have a copay for that. So,
Right.
you know, on 40.
Alex, what happened to the clinic thing? We haven't heard from them. It's been over a year.
Yeah, we intend to work on that. We have not started that process yet. But it's something that's, we definitely want to kick off soon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because that's one part of our long range plan was the clinics, correct?
Right. I mean, the finances of the insurance fund, since we had that kind of discussed, obviously not great, but in terms of planning, you're right, we do need to kick that off.
All right.
Mr. Rella,
Yes, ma'am.
last year I brought to the board a concern from several retirees. I don't know if the Health Insurance Committee still works on that proposal for them, but last year it increased, I think I was told 50%. Is that correct for retirees?
For not for insurance. I think it was 7%. I want to say last year.
How much did you say?
I think it was 7% for insurance last year. I had it on one of my slides, but basically the retirees pay the board what the board would pay for the insurance. We do offer that as a benefit to all of our retirees.
Would you take a look at that a second time so that I won't give you incorrect figures? But I know several that call retirees, and we've just had 5 major retirees from our system last week that I just found out today about. And I know that they will be talking about the cost for their insurance as well. Would you take a look at that? And whoever, I know Dr. Paulson serves on the Health Insurance Committee, that you all would try to hold fast to what you did last year and not increase that. Whatever, if it was only 7%, that's not what I was told. But if it was only 7%, that doesn't sound terribly awful, but I don't know.
Can I say something to that? If they're over 65, and I don't know if they were, then they can take a choice each year, which is very unusual too. You can come in and out because choose to go to Medicare and get a supplement or something like that, which is much cheaper than any insurance just about anywhere. So most of our people over 65 choose to do that. But we also put in that they could come back in the open enrollment period because a lot of people are afraid because they hear all these bad things about the government wanting to do with Medicare, way of Medicare and all that stuff. So that's something, I don't know how old they are, Lee. The retirees that get hurt in this country are the ones that retire in the early 50s to 65. That's where the problem is because they can't get health insurance. They got to buy our health insurance. And they're lucky they can do that just because there's not Medicare for them. So that's something, I don't know, again, what their age is. It's something they should look into, I think. I know my wife does that. We pay half, less than half of what we pay for the insurance. So, and we do that, Alex, we put that information out every year, don't we? Alex?
Yes, sir.
We get that information out to everybody, right?
Sure.
And what we're going to do, we're talking about another thing is expanding our enrollment to where we get to everybody and explain it to them better. So that's another good thing this year, because a lot of people don't realize what they're getting, and they don't know what they can do. And we've lost more than 50% of our retirees, haven't we, Alex? over 65. You don't lose the ones over 80. You lose the ones like 65 to 80.
Yeah, so
Right.
we've been pretty diligent because in a lot of scenarios, in most scenarios, going to Medicare is a better option. It's a
Sure.
best benefit at a lower cost. So what we've done is been aggressive with our, not aggressive, but we've been communicating a lot with those employees when they turn 65, when they hit those different milestones that, hey, you might want to look at Medicare and maybe buy a supplement plan because it's going to save you money in the long run.
An advantage. But we're talking about everybody, not just retirees. We're talking about expanding our enrollment to where we get to everybody and make sure
Dr.
that.
Paulson, I apologize. I was just corrected by a citizen who's listening to us.
Okay.
Said it was life insurance, not health insurance.
Life insurance, yes, yes, yes. How's that? I don't want to get into this because that wasn't good. But anyway, yes, that's why I thought that was it. Life insurance doubled. You got it. And from now on, we need to work on that not happening again. But it's already been happening a pretty good amount. All right, so that makes sense. The other thing, the health insurance, I think we do a good job for the retirees. If you're 55 and retire, you got the only choice you got, right, Alex, is stay with us.
Alex, or the private market.
Yeah, that's private market.
But the private, I mean, obviously, we do subsidize the insurance costs for our older retirees and older employees. I mean, if you go to the market and you're 67 years old, your rates are going to be obviously much more than if you're 25. So,
well,
we charge everyone the same rate.
If our federal government would just lower the Medicare to 55, that would be tremendous. They talked about it. That's a compromise with the Medicare for all. But anyway, we're getting off of different things. Thank you.
Mrs. Roy, you're unmuted now. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rella, are you going to present on impact fees as well?
No, that'll be me, Madam Chair.
Okay.
And I don't know if we're done. I don't want to step on Mr. Rella's toes. So.
I didn't hear anyone.
Okay.
That's all I had. If there's no more feedback from the board, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so on impact fees, one of the things I wanted to address with the board as we start getting into the finer details with the county, which again is just kind of started. I spoke with their attorney's office and they were having some of their people look at the draft ordinance that I'm going to share in a second, as well as the presentation Mr. Bowles did for us last month, the updated one and the original one from back in January. And just to try and get a better sense of what the board's feeling is on the issue, we didn't really, or you all didn't really discuss in great detail your feelings on what percentage rate to set it at, 100%, 75, 50, 25, pick a number. I do think there was pretty strong feeling that Mr. Bowles' Main Street dividing line made sense. So but I'd be happy to, if anyone has had a chance to digest and wants to think about that some more, this would be a good time to talk about it before I have to kind of legally describe that dividing line, which again is very easy along Main Street. Once we get south of Main Street and north of Main Street, we got to pick which roads or even points on a map to create that divide. And then I also wanted to, and I'm going to pull up the ordinance, the draft ordinance now. One of the other issues is the low-cost housing exception, which if you recall, Mr. Bowles talked about, it's very difficult to use and succeed with, but it does at least create that option, which I think just from what the board discussed in January, I think most of you thought that was better than not having the option at all. But I did want to kind of walk through that section. And so I'm going to first pull up the ordinance, or if you'd rather talk percentages, I can pull up Mr. Rella's slide. Then we're only looking at one page instead of a Word doc. Um, um,
Can I ask questions about the areas first?
yes, sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'm good with the east-west corridor with Main Street, but what I was wondering, the outlying areas like the Micanopy and South 441 area, is that something that you're saying we're gonna have to go on a map to figure out?
Yeah,
And
well, so I need to get back with Mr. Bowles and make sure that I heard him correctly when he, he talked about kind of coming up. I don't remember if he was exact to the exact house when we got to the southern part of the county and the north part, and whether the map was just a way to draw a map to give you the illustration, or if it was street
Okay.
by street that he had it.
Okay, so here I had questions about Micanopy area 441 South. And then to the north, I was thinking, I'm same with Alachua High Springs area and how we were including Newberry Archer. I think Newberry with its west and it's creating a strain as well as the growth in the Archer area. And then to the northeast, the Manioka and Fairbanks, La Crosse, how are we going to deal with them? Because if I recall correctly, I know some folks that live in Fairbanks and their children attend schools, the Lake Forest and East Side. And
That's
Bishop, yeah. So those were the only questions I had about where they would fall in the assessments. I think we were, if I recall and understood Mr. Bowles correctly, those east of Main Street, if we wanted, since they were not creating a strain on the system, and we could assess $0 dollars for them. But so I was just trying to figure out where those areas there would fall in there. And then in areas that are not in a municipality, that are in the unincorporated area, would those fees be collected by the county, like as long as they were just in the quadrant area, east and west of Maine, and however we define that. So.
Right. So some of that I do need, that's what I need to talk to the county about. And I'm going to share, this is from Mr. Bowles' presentation. This is the map.
Okay.
And let me see if I can zoom it. Make it a little bit bigger. So as you were just discussing, so here's, if the pointer is showing it properly, this is Micanopy down here. So he has it coming down Main, and then instead of taking Williston Road and going down 441 there, it comes down this way, then gets a little bit on 441, comes over under 75. And so this part, I'm not sure whether that is, it doesn't seem to match up with a school zone. It's not any of those main roads. I think it's going to be a lot easier from a planning purpose. And I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is exactly what I was thinking of as I'm looking at the map, is trying to use a road, which is a lot easier for anyone planning. Are you west or east of a particular road? And so, and I didn't want to just use 441 because there's bends and it kind of cuts right through Micanopy. Do you use 75 once you get, do you take Williston to 75 and do that? But there's a lot of growth at that southern edge there that I'd be worried about. And then to the north where he has it essentially going up where Fairbanks, which is over in here, and Waldo, those are well into the eastern part that aren't covered. But if
I'll just tell you, I can't see your pointer because my thing is spinning, but that's okay. I can hear you. But I think those are just questions that I had, and I can email them to you if you want me to.
That'd be great, because again, we can't vote right now on exactly the line, but I really want to get your sense of using roads and not trying to figure out exactly how he drew this, but make a, if it means adjusting something a little bit to follow a road. And again, 75, once we get down far enough south, might be a simple line to follow. And as we go north, the road that heads into La Crosse, looking at that and just making sure that it's sensible. It doesn't divide a community. I don't want to divide La Crosse. I don't want to divide Micanopy, obviously. But I did want to give you all a chance to kind of, after it's been a month, it's one thing to look at overall numbers, but then the fine details, I don't want to surprise you or catch you with an 8-page ordinance that's really detailed, but those are really the key points. Key parts is where does it apply and where does it not apply? And I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on the map before I move on to the other part. Maybe this is a good time to do that.
Well, Mr. Moore, I think we need to actually see it when it's drawn before we comment. But I love the idea of following an established road rather than just an arbitrary line. I think you said it makes it a lot easier to understand for everybody.
Okay, and I'll get back with Mr. Bowles too, because hopefully he'll have information for me, such as the La Crosse area is one that, should that be west or east? I don't know enough about La Crosse to know whether they've had any growth in the last while, where it would be more appropriate to treat it as with some of the eastern half areas compared to Newberry, which obviously we've been hearing about its growth, High Springs, Alachua, those other areas. So yeah, so what I'll do is I will try and come up with a road-based one. I might come up with 2 or 3 if there's a couple options, depending on, once I get down to the finer details at the southern edge and northern edge of the map, and try and share those out. Talk to the county as well. But yeah, once you get into municipalities, if that city is the one that's collecting the impact fee, then we need an interlocal with them. And certainly you don't want to divide a collection area like that. But so that's one issue that I did definitely want to go over was the map. And if there's anyone else, then I'm going to move over to the ordinance itself. And do you see the map again, or do you see a Word doc?
We see a Word doc, but we
Okay.
can barely read it.
Okay, I'm gonna zoom some more, but it's sorry, it's on the other monitor, and I didn't know if I was showing you the right thing. Well, and I'm gonna go through some of the highlighted areas. It's not super important that all the legalese get examined right now, especially while it's still in its draft form. But some of these highlighted areas are where I was trying to insert the Part A, Part B idea that Mr. Bowles presented us. And so you can see here in C is where, I start talking about, and I want to go through with the county attorney. They have impact fees. I want to make sure that we use language that's consistent, that they'll be able to apply easily. But so where I just talked about, for purposes both the assessment and use of the impact fee, county will be divided into parts A and B, with the fee being assessed and used only in B. And then I've inserted language like that throughout. This is mostly modeled after what Santa Rosa just did recently in adopting impact fees. So section E, this would be if we do a resolution. In addition to this, I mean, I've talked about having a whereas, therefore, which might be, I personally like it as a way for the board to state kind of more in its own words, as opposed to legal ordinance words, what it is that it's trying to do. But again, stressing part B, there's language here that I've highlighted because it grammatically makes no sense. And so it's either something that came out of Santa Rosa wrong, or I just need to look and try and figure out what they were trying to say, because I've read it 20 times and still don't know what they're saying. Again, I and J talking about part B. And so then I'm just going to scroll down unless somebody tells me to stop. This is the definition section. I want to insert part A definition, part B definition. This is where I try to be as explicit as possible without filling up every paragraph with a description of what part A and part B is. Put it in the definition so that it's really clear. I should have highlighted that. And then here in section 5, this is the fee schedule. And so I'm going to switch screens from here, or I'll switch back and forth depending on what you'd like me to show up. I have Alex's screen, which I'll bring up just to give you the comparison, where he's got the last 5 years of permits that have been issued, what they would be for over 5 years with that maximum fee if it were 75%. So that's like the percentages based on the total amount of activity over the last 5 years. And then the one I have is the percentages based on each individual impact fee that might be imposed. And I don't know that we really had a good discussion on the merits of 100%, the merits of 75%, the merits of 50%. I have not found anything that says the reason people do it 75% is this. It generally just seems to be, it doesn't feel right to go all the way to 100, or setting it at 50 isn't going to be enough. It's more a feel and based on the local sense of what the fee is being used for and how it's going to be used. So with that,
Brian, the vast majority of the districts are 75%.
it did seem to, and certainly that was the average. There were a couple at 100. There are a few that cut it severely way back in the discussion in 2008. It can be adjusted.
But the majority, that's where Bowles got it, because it was the majority of the districts were 75%. And when he came to us that first meeting, he put it at 75% when he gave us an example.
And again, that would just be a best guess that is based on, we didn't want to go all the way to 100%. If we need more later, where there's still room to go higher, but it is a significant need, so it needs to be set at a significant number. That's the best reading I can get as to why they have picked largely that 75% range.
I had a question. That note down there, it says it's from the data's from the Board of County Commission of Growth Management, but it says that it excludes the Gainesville, Alachua, Newberry, and High Springs municipalities. So that's only things that were in the unincorporated Alachua County. Is that what those numbers are?
I'll let Alex answer.
Yeah, so that's correct, board member Certain. I tried to get data countywide. I thought that's what I was receiving from the growth manager. They did provide some clarification that it was only for the city, only for the unincorporated, to not include the cities, and I wasn't able to turn around quick enough to get those data points. But I think in general, when we look at our growth, most of it is in the county, I would argue. Really, these numbers are just used as a general guide to what we think, the revenues could potentially be. Of course, they're backward looking and going forward. What does the housing market do? There's a lot of question marks in there, but just wanted to provide something. And I know board member Hyatt had requested it, and we'll continue to kind of get more information as we go forward. But I wanted to give the board just something that might give you a little, just a ballpark on what we might be receiving.
All right. Thank you. I was just trying to put that in perspective, the number that was there as to, because I was like, wow, if that doesn't include Gainesville, those other municipalities, I thought it was a typo. So that's why I was asking.
And the numbers seem very high to me, but I'm working off of 3 or 4 year memory. And I don't know if Suzanne Wynn, I think, is on, and I don't want to put her on the spot. She may not remember either, but it seems to me that Gene Bowles at some point told us anticipated numbers that were much less than that. And so I wonder then if the permits weren't for more than just single family, although that's exactly what Alex asked for. It seems kind of, those numbers seem very high compared to what we were told originally. And Suzanne, I saw unmuted herself, so I'll stop if she can add anything.
I was going to, but then you kind of covered what I was going to say. So
your memory is that he was talking numbers more like maximum of $1 million a year. Is that?
I honestly don't remember, Brian.
It was definitely less, but I think we've seen a lot more growth. I mean, everyone's seen it around town in the last 5 years and the 5 years previous to that. So, taking off some years with low growth or no growth and adding some of the higher growth years obviously has an impact.
Yeah, that's very possible that when he was saying that, it was 4 years ago and he was looking at 2008 to 2013 when there wouldn't have been nearly as much growth. So but I did think the numbers were high too, but that's another thing that we just got to work with the county and kind of make sure that we're going on. But even if the numbers are off, they still give you an idea of what the different percentages do to the number overall. And so I'm going to stop again and because this I think this is a pretty key issue for the board. So if you have any thoughts, this would be a good time to let me hear them. So.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could
Of course, go ahead.
address Mr. Moore. I believe I asked last time when Mr. Bowles was here, and my understanding is that if we enacted or decided to impose impact fees, that we would still have a choice as to the starting date. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, well, and some of that control is in when you send it to the county, when the county formally adopts. I believe, and I don't really want to, I'm not going to share and scroll while I look for it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I believe that even the ordinance talks about a starting date or takes effect. So effective date. So, all right, I'm going to share the screen. I did find it easier than I thought I would. So here at the bottom, it says effective date. It shall be filed with Secretary of State within 10 days after enactment. Or the ordinance shall take effect upon receipt of official acknowledgement from that office or 90 days after provision of notice, whichever last occurs. So it doesn't sound like you can completely control it in terms of we've enacted it now, but it doesn't take effect for 6 months, 12 months. It is a kind of a ministerial filing issue and then 90 days after that. So you can kind of control how quickly you want them to file it. But that only gets you so far. That's not exact. You can't, it does not appear, and again, I'll talk to the county further about some things like this, but that you can say this begins, what's today, June 3rd, 2021, a year from today. In order to do that, you would have to wait to submit it, file it, and record it until 90 days before that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure. I think I might be muted.
No, we can hear you, but your video went dark.
Yep, I'm spinning out there, so I don't know if I'm going to go out. But you were wanting feedback on the percentage. I could agree with 75%, and then if we saw the need to increase, I would be there. So, other than the other questions that I had, I'm kind of good. Thank you.
Okay.
I also agree with the 75%. As I recall, that was kind of what Mr. Bowles recommended.
In the absence of clear kind of guidance, I was going to go with 75, or sorry, the superintendent was going to go with 75. But, and I don't want to vote, and you're not beholden on 75 for doing this. It's really just a starting point for bringing it to you for the actual vote later. But I do not finding any true philosophical or legal reasons for 50, 75, 100. It really, I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing strongly felt here about why it needed to be maxed or not maxed or, you know. So.
Well, Hillsborough County went over.
Yeah, that I don't know how they did. So
it's a couple counties that are over. So yeah.
And if there's, if there's nothing else, I'm going to share the screen back to the last part that I mentioned I wanted to talk about, which is the affordable housing section. And so this is a little bit dense. Let me see if I can make it any bigger. I don't know how well that reads on your screen.
A little bit better.
And, and again, these are just kind of just legal steps, but it's complicated. If you're seeking the affordable housing exception, you file with the superintendent an application, name, address, all the other stuff there under A. In order to receive it, and I'm under B now, it must meet all the restrictions of affordable housing as provided in this ordinance, and these restrictions must continue for a period of at least 8 years. If the residential unit meets the requirements, superintendent will issue the written exemption, be presented to the county. The amount of the education fee will not be increased to replace that lost revenue. And then E, in the event the residential unit fails to stay qualified for the 8 years, it's no longer affordable housing residence, the impact fee at the time would apply. And it's just, that's a lot of steps to take for generally in an area where there's not a whole lot of affordable housing being built at this time. But I did want to hear whether, even if it's difficult, even if it's something maybe we have to try to revisit later if it doesn't work, whether the board felt strongly that there should at least be an attempt to provide an affordable housing out for the part B of the county, the western half.
If I may, I think we have a glaring shortage of affordable housing from my perspective and from my understanding in Alachua County, and this may not move the needle at all, but I think we need to, if we can give any encouragement to provide affordable housing, particularly if it's part of a larger development. I think that's, I would totally be in favor of keeping that idea as part of it.
Mr. Moore, I don't even know why, or I'm asking, can we just give a blanket exemption for affordable housing for the reasons that Mr. Hyatt mentioned? I mean, in the first place, someone who's in affordable housing, it would be difficult for anyone to go through this complicated process, but I would think someone with fewer resources would not be able to hire a lawyer or, someone to help them get this exemption. So I'm just wondering if it would be possible to give a blanket exemption.
I think that some of the difficulty is defining affordable housing, and when it's a blanket exemption, and who makes the decision whether that does qualify, whether it qualifies for 6 months but then changes. I feel like I'm answering for Gene Bowles without knowing well enough, but I believe a lot of this would apply more to some of the multifamily housing, where it might be the developer who would be able to use this, that does have the resources and experience to navigate these paths. They probably, some of the financing might be through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which does a lot of this and has a lot of requirements that these builders are used to. Now, I don't know that for certain that it's really more for them than an individual homeowner, but that rings true to me just from the long time ago when I used to look at Florida Housing Finance rules. So.
Okay. If it's the builder that does it, I withdraw my objection. But even so, even the builder, I think, should get a break if he is creating affordable housing that we so desperately need in this county.
I think that would apply to a builder also, if it's a Habitat for Humanity or some builder that does the NHDC or something like that, one of the programs that build out and they're building affordable housing. I don't think that would preclude them for applying for the exemption or the exception. I'm no attorney, but.
No, yeah, I mean, anyone could apply. It's just that some of the difficulty is like coming up with a legal definition or a standard for what is affordable housing. So this one it's not super descriptive in that it talks about shall be occupied by low-income persons or very low-income persons, including the form of restrictions to be contained within the deed as required by 9A 6B of this ordinance. So there are some specifics, and I'm sure that all comes from some federal standards, and as well as state standards, some of the financing standards that come with some of these projects. So in most cases, I don't think this is going to apply too many times to an individual built a home on their own and considered affordable housing. It's going to be, as Ms. Certain said, something through a particular project or development, or it's going to be a multifamily affordable housing project, most likely. But again, that's more stuff that I have to get through with the county, who probably has much more experience with this, since this is obviously new to us. So. Anyone else?
Are you done, Mr. Moore?
That would be it for the impact fees.
Okay.
And if we're going to move into facilities, I'd only ask that we take a 3-minute recess before we get started, since
Sure.
I have to
Sure.
pull
We've
the
been
PowerPoint and
for a while.
need to.
That's fine with me. So this meeting is paused for what, 5 minutes?
That's sure. And I'm going to put up the phone number screen for the 5 minutes like that. And
Okay. You'd let me
I'll
know
when
when,
the 5 minutes are up.
exactly when to reconvene. Thank you.
We still have about a minute left, Mrs. Roy. Jackie, while we're waiting, has anyone come to speak at the boardroom?
No.
It looks like we're still waiting on Ms. Clark, Ms. Certain. There's Ms. Clark. And there's Ms. Certain. And so it has been 5 minutes. If you're ready, Madam Chair, let me unmute you.
All right. This meeting is of the school board workshop is now reconvened to begin with the facilities update. I believe Ms. Johnson is going to start.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Over the next few minutes, we would like to address a number of the issues that have been raised in the last couple of weeks regarding the purchase of the Sanders property in the Jonesville area. You, of course, are familiar with a lot of those concerns that have been expressed that, for example, the land acquisition and the new construction were not emphasized during the half-cent campaign, that the purchase of the property and the construction of new elementary school I were funded before projects at existing schools were underway. Concerns that the cost of the property is too high and some questioning of the appraisals and the realtors. Concerns that there was not enough public discussion of the purchase, and also concerns about the purchase of the property during COVID-19. Of course, I do want to share that the ballot language does say that land acquisition and improvement would be one of the things on which the half-cent sales tax would be spent. And of course, that ballot language was included in all of the presentations and written materials that the school district provided to the public. Brian, you want to move on to the next one? This is a slide from one of the presentations, the many presentations I gave. I probably gave this presentation 40 or 50 times leading up to the election, and other district staff did the same. And we stressed that there were 3 key areas that we were trying to accomplish. Modernizing our existing schools, getting back on track with maintenance, because of course, as everyone recognizes, when you go off track with maintenance and you're not able to keep up with it, you end up with more extensive and more expensive problems later on. But we also talked about the need for capacity and building new space and eliminating portables. And in other slides in this same presentation, we talked about how many students we had in portables, how many portables we had, how many of our schools were overcrowded. We also stressed the fact that the issue was not just a lack of classroom space, that adding classrooms to existing schools was not going to be enough, because you had so many situations in which the core facilities, things like media centers and cafeterias, were just not big enough. And we constantly talked about the fact that so many students were having to start having lunch at 10 o'clock, sometimes even 9:45 or 9:30 in the morning, just to get them through those core facilities. So that was something that we stressed throughout. As far as the issue of work not happening at existing schools, and I think some of that is understandably due to the misperception that if you don't see walls coming down and you don't see bulldozers on a particular site, that must mean nothing is happening. And of course, that is not true. There's a huge amount, as you all know, there's a huge amount of work that has to go in to each project before you actually see the work being done. And of course, you know that probably better than anybody, because a lot of those things, most of those things come to you at board meetings for approval. Things like hiring architects and construction managers and so on and so forth. But we do want to bring everybody a quick update on where we are with some of the major reconstruction projects that we talked about frequently during the campaign. At Howard Bishop Middle School, again, the target completion date is the fall of 2021 for that project, which will involve the demolition of the vast majority of that campus and reconstruction. The design plans are complete. The demolition is set to begin in mid-July, and board members, you should have received an email from me with a tentative demolition party scheduled for July 14th. The transition school obviously is under construction at Westwood, and the move out of the existing buildings at Bishop is underway. In fact, the moving trucks were there yesterday and today, and we got this picture is just from yesterday. This shows the Howard Bishop site plan. We are going to be working with the contractor and with the architect for not just this project, but also the Idlewild and Metcalf projects. We have a meeting scheduled with them tomorrow. We, of course, were planning to bring these plans back to the communities at in-person meetings. Obviously, COVID means that's now impossible. So we are going to be working with the architects to put together videos where the architects explain what's involved with these new site plans, and we will then push that out to the entire community, but certainly to the Howard Bishop, Idlewild, and Metcalf communities as well, so that they can see what is planned for their revitalized campuses. Metcalf Elementary School, also the target completion date is fall of 2021. The design plans are almost done. The construction of the new buildings will begin in 2020. And the difference between that one and Idlewild and Bishop, obviously, is that the students will be able to remain on campus during construction, but obviously in a separate portion of the campus. Then we have Idlewild Elementary School. Again, like Metcalf, like Bishop, target completion date, fall of 2021. The design plans for Idlewild are 60% complete. The demolition of the existing buildings, and again, that's another situation where the vast majority of the buildings are going to be demolished, and the construction of the new buildings will also begin this summer. The renovations of Prairie View, which of course will be the transition school for the Eagles, is finished and moving has begun, and the trucks were out there yesterday and again today, I believe, and this is a picture from just yesterday of some of the moving being done. As far as construction and capacity projects, our two big ones right now, the design plans for Elementary School I are complete. That was an easier process because they are based largely on the plans that we used for Meadowbrook, which was meant it was cheaper and quicker to get those plans done. Construction will also begin this summer, and like Metcalf, like Idlewild, like Bishop, the target completion date is the fall of 2021. We've also begun the process of selecting a design professional for the new 15 classroom building at Oakview Middle School. Renovations and remodeling, design work for the renovation of both the Santa Fe High School auditorium and the Eastside High School auditorium is underway. And actually some preliminary improvements have already been completed at the Santa Fe auditorium, for example, new flooring. And then the remodeling of Kanapaha Middle School space to create additional classroom space, that is already actually complete. HVAC and or roof replacements. This is something we talked about frequently in the lead up to the election. And again, what I'm talking about here, I do want to stress that we are talking about replacements. We're not talking about patching roofs. We're not talking about repairing HVAC systems. We're talking about replacements. And that has been completed at all of the schools you saw on the previous slide and all of the schools that you see on this slide here. And those projects are underway at the schools you see listed here. And that's going to continue as we add more projects on a regular basis. Security upgrades is something that was also included in the ballot language, and it's something we talked about during our presentations and in the materials that we shared with the public. Primarily it involves fencing and security gates. As you know, our schools were built long before we had to worry about campus intruders and school shootings, and so their designs were not really conducive to limiting access. So what you've seen is the construction and installation of a lot of fences and security gates like the one you see here at Alachua Elementary School. And a lot of that was done last summer and over this last school year at the schools you see listed. Also this summer, we're going to begin the installation of new security door locks on all the doors in all of our schools, except those, of course, that are undergoing major reconstruction. Maintenance. Again, the goal was to get back onto a regular maintenance schedule. A lack of funding had made that pretty much impossible to do. So we've got HVAC, energy upgrades and repairs going on at the schools you see listed, flooring projects happening at these other schools. But again, this is not a static list. This is constantly evolving. Each school was allocated $50,000 to spend as they and with the approval of their SAC saw fit. It had to be some sort of facilities related project. And in some cases, these were projects that needed to be approved by the district building committee to make sure that they didn't interfere with any future development plans for that school. So schools have used that for everything from playgrounds like the one you see at Rawlings Elementary School in this picture, furniture like the cafeteria furniture you see here at Newberry High School, digital marquees, bleachers, sensory paths, things like that. One of the things that the district did do was group similar projects together to save money. So trying to do playgrounds together and marquees together, for example. Some property improvements. Remember, we had a very wet area in between Lincoln Middle School and the Williams Elementary School campus. The drainage improvements in that area are complete, and that was actually a cooperative project with the Wild Spaces Public Places effort. Parking lot reconstruction at Stephen Foster Elementary School is done, and the redesign plans for Wiles Elementary School's parking lot are complete, and the construction is underway there. Land acquisition. The district actually has closed on the property in Jonesville. And one of the other things that you are aware of is that the potential purchase of property next to Gainesville High School to be used for the reconstruction of Gainesville High School is right now under evaluation. We've got a bird's eye view of the GHS campus on the next slide. And as you may know, we are looking at knocking down a significant portion of the GHS campus. That campus is also pretty landlocked, so there aren't a whole lot of places that you can put additional portables and house students while that school is being renovated. So the property just to the north, that area there that Brian is referring to is the area that, that right now our facility staff is exploring. And if anybody is interested in getting regular updates, this is our facilities updates page. We update this on a very regular basis. There are two things I'd like to point out. Brian, if you could click on the project update summary. That gives folks almost a quick review of what you just saw in the presentation with projects broken down by category, and you can see what has been completed. We're also very proud of the story map. What that allows people to do is look school by school at the projects that are planned, the timelines, what progress has been made, where we are in the process. You can see a site map that shows which buildings are coming down, which ones are being renovated. And you can also, there is a project update section. And Brian, so if you would go to middle schools. I guess our hot link didn't work. Go to Bishop. So there you can see what's planned and what progress has been made. But if you also look at, Brian, scroll up just a little bit at the project progress reports. And what this does is it allows you to see what phase we're at. You can see that we're 100% completed with the planning, design, and permitting stage at Howard Bishop. You can see how much has been encumbered for specific portions of that project, how much of it has already been completed, how much has already been spent, so on and so forth. So at this point, I don't know, Madam Chair, whether you'd like to have myself or the facility staff take any questions or move on to Brian's portion of this same presentation.
Questions are fine at this point, if anyone has anything.
Well, I just wanted to say that it's not it was a wonderful presentation, but this as pointed out, this information has been consistently available to the public, to board members, to everyone. And this is a commitment of what we're doing with the tax money and what we're doing with all of our capital outlay funds. So I think it's important when people know what we're doing, know what the plans are, that it's up to us to squelch rumors that simply aren't true. I really appreciate the update and the fact that we really don't need to have a regular update because it's online regularly. So anyway, thank you, Ms. Johnson. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
May I speak, Madam Chair, or I can
Of
wait?
course, Ms. Certain, go ahead.
Thank you. If there was someone else, I can wait.
I'll
But I
wait.
didn't want to say,
Go ahead.
unlike Mr. Hyatt, I think we should have regular updates, and I don't think we should send everyone to the website. I watched the oversight meeting this morning because I had the Children's Trust, the conflict with that on Monday. So I wasn't able to join live, but at any rate, I watched it this morning. And when the consensus from the constituents is that there's some disparity or there's a disconnect, we would do well as elected officials to heed that advice and to change and modify how we respond. So Ms. Johnson mentioned that she did a presentation probably 50 times, and there were 3 points that were emphasized, and the public, what they got, the majority of the people, I haven't had anyone to tell me anything different. I'm not saying they don't exist, but we haven't heard those people speak. So let's not be tone deaf as a group of 5 people. Folks have said that they were convinced to vote for this tax because it would be to renovate, refurbish existing facilities and catch up on maintenance. School I was in the packet, I saw it and I told people that. But please let us not act like the citizens are wrong. Let's heed what they're telling us. If they feel like that we're violating their trust, let's heed that. Let's not keep saying what we did. So, and that they didn't get it. Let's adjust and come back to the citizens in a way. And so along those lines, this is something that I want to recommend. And this is a little early in the presentation. I was going to wait till Mr. Moore did his part since he said he's doing part of it. But I think the Oversight Committee, we should hear from them and we should act. And I'm going to suggest, and I hope that my colleagues will agree, that we allow the Oversight Committee to bring us back language that would give that they think that they should do, what their role should be. And we have final approval to vote on it just as we did back in December. But the Oversight Committee needs to have some, a little bit more input on the front end of this. And of course, we're the elected officials and we get to vote on it, but we should not use people and say it's an independent oversight committee when they don't have any oversight. It's all after sight. And so I'll address some other things later on. And when we say squelching rumors, I'll address that later on, probably in the presentation. But that is two recommendations I have. I do think we should have additional updates. And as one of our oversight committees said, don't send people always to the website, provide an alternative method. Remember, we have folks in this community that there is a digital divide. They're not online.
Madam Chair.
The second thing is that we do something with the about allowing the or charging the oversight committee with revising and bringing us back a proposal of how their committee would function, and they could look at other counties. This is not something the district staff should write. I think Pastor Smith being their chair and they were all in agreement to be called back for a meeting prior to their next meeting in August, and where they could propose some additional language or some revisions to that document that was shared with them from the December 2018 meeting, and then that could come back to the board for a vote.
Okay, thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Building trust with the community.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir, Dr. Paulson. I think Mr. Hyatt wanted to say something too, but
I'm
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, I was at the meeting, I listened to that meeting. The lady is already bringing language back, so I don't know, I think kind of redundant. And
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Dr.
it
Paulson.
was, it's kind of redundant. There was a lady that, if you said you watched it, they have a lady working on language that's bringing forth the language.
I didn't understand her to say she was bringing back
Well, they
language.
said bring it back, work on it. I heard it.
But we'll see what she brings back then. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it clear as a bell.
Okay,
And one
thank
more
you.
thing, can I, Ms. Roy?
Sure.
The one thing about what I think, you know, we have a responsibility too, not when we go out. I returned a lot of those emails that we got. And the biggest thing I got was, you know, and I looked at it and I explained things. Let's go first to SPAC. How many times did the SPAC talk to us and tell us about buying land and why we couldn't go to the east side because it was wetlands, et cetera, et cetera? Many, many times. So we knew that about as board members. But the other thing is, when I got some returns and I got like, thank you for that. The people that got in touch with me didn't tell me that. And, you know, that made me wonder, why are we sending things out just partially the truth? Why don't we send everything out? Otherwise, that's why we have these problems. We need to get along and, you know, look, we're not perfect. And I think what Mrs. Clark said, she said she understands what was happening when she talked at the end. And and you know, we make mistakes. Most of it was public relations, and we need to refocus on that, and we will. But I just don't understand why we don't tell people the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So if somebody writes, I got these emails, I'd be glad to bring you the emails. And, you know, I said, well, thank you. All I was trying to do was explain to these people, for them to come back to me and tell me that what the information they got wasn't quite as complete. That is troublesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson.
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay,
President.
I wanted to, I'm going to read the responsibilities of the Oversight Committee and review the expenditure of revenues from the surtax and ask for more information pertaining to the expenditure if needed. Provide a written report to the superintendent and school board regarding the expenditure of surtax revenues on an annual basis, and report to the superintendent and school board chair in a timely fashion any inconsistencies between the ballot language and the actual expenditure of surtax revenues. And the key word here was the first one I read, which is review. It's you know, it's the board's responsibility to approve of expenditures. If we're going to have an air conditioning unit replaced at Gainesville High School, are we going to put that before an oversight committee? I don't think that's the purpose, and unless we change what the bylaws say.
That's what I was.
And going back to the whole idea of email after email saying we're ignoring the east side, and saying that we started before we did anything else on the new school. These are figures from last week. As of right now, 96.8% of our anticipated revenue, capital outlay, including the 1.5 mil, during the length, the duration of the tax, 96.8% is used on things other than the purchase in Jonesville and the construction of elementary school I. So when there's a sort of this, what Dr. Paulson said, when we're getting part of the information out and the implication that we are using less or that, oh, it's all about the new school. again, let me repeat the numbers. 96.8% is being used for things other than the new school and the Jonesville purchase. The Jonesville purchase is about 0.6 of 1%. So if the argument is that the emphasis is what we're going to do to repair and maintain our and replace current facilities, guess what? 96.8% of the money is going for just that. So I shouldn't say I'm baffled, but I'm disappointed that those points are conveniently left out.
Mrs.
Thank you,
Roy.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Roy.
I'm sorry, Dr. McNeely. I muted everybody when we had that feedback, Mrs.
I
Roy.
unmuted because I need to say.
Right, and now I've unmuted Mrs. Roy. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Roy.
Yes, sir, I am.
That's okay. That's all right. You can hear my voice. I want to chime in because we've had two colleagues who have said about the disappointment and the partial truth. And I'm here to tell you that if we could have, meaning colleagues certain and myself, could have just had one more vote, not for the purchase, but for the very special meeting, I am positive that all of the truths would have come out, all of them. The truths that Dr. Paulson and Mr. Hyatt are trying to convince everyone now that some of the comments have baffled and not been accurately correct. And as far as some of the East Side properties, I can agree with some of what both of my colleagues are saying. But when we don't have the courage enough, even if the vote never had changed, but just to have that special meeting, to listen, to discuss, to communicate with everyone, I think we would not have to have this conversation today. It's unfortunate that the special meeting was not held. And so until we come together, because this will not go away for the rest of this board or any future board because of how it was handled, then we are going to be stuck and baffled with comments that may be true, may not be true, but you'll never get it all cleared up. It's not going to be cleared up by things that Mrs. Johnson will put on the web page for us. It's not going to be cleared up by what Nathan writes in the Sun. It's not going to be cleared up by whatever the superintendent says. But until you have a clear opening discussion like we're having with each other right now, but unfortunately, we did not have this opportunity. It's not going to go away. Even if we wished it away, it's not going to go away because so many people feel that the purchase was right on target and should have been done. And so many people feel that this was not a good time to make this decision. So until we have the courage to say, even after the fact, and when we come back inside of the building of downtown district or whatever, or continue to have Zoom meetings and have this just like we're doing now, you will not have it settled. Now, my comments, I was participating as Dr. Paulson was on yesterday with the Oversight Committee. I think we have the bottom line when it comes to the decision, the 5 of us that were elected. However, I think that some things need to be changed with what the responsibilities will be of the oversight committee. Number one, and I hope that, let's see who's here, Ms. Peck is taking notes. Review all appraisals for land purchase. Visit the site, whether it's built or remodeled or being remodeled. Review all contract proposals. Review project budgets and changes to budgets over time. And looking at how we are budgeting these projects. I'm here to tell you, my friends and my colleagues, it's not going to go away. We want it to go away.
You
I,
said
for
that,
one,
Dr. McNeely. You said
yes,
that.
I'm continuing to speak. We want it to go away. But as we have done and as we have pushed, we did not do the right thing, but it's up to us now to make the change. We can make the change. I'm not saying go back, rescind, try to get your cash money back. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying let all of us, all 5 of us, the superintendent, the attorneys, Mr. White, Mr. Coward, Ms. Wynn, everybody come to the table together and talk about the issues that took place. And then let's straighten it out if you want it straightened. If not, it will continue on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McNeely. If I think everyone's had a chance to speak, and I would like to speak now. I think it comes back to what Mr. Hyatt said in the beginning. We have to, if people are mistaken in their impressions, we have to say, well, it was in the ballot language. That does not mean that we're putting them down. That does not mean we're being rude. We're simply telling the truth, and that's what we're supposed to do. Now, I think that we all understand there are going to be changes in the oversight committee's role. At least they have requested that, and I think even that was in the PowerPoint. Going forward, we are going to do things differently. And, you know, I think that we should come up with some language, run it by the oversight committee, and then bring it back to the board for approval. Apparently, the policy language was based on the 1 mil referendum. And, you know, this is more complicated when a land purchase is contemplated. And I think everybody has learned from the experience what we could do better, including the superintendent. And I've talked to some of the members of the committee, and that is, and I've gotten written suggestions from them and have given it to Mrs. Clark already. So just because we're correcting people's misunderstanding, and I read some of Dr. Paulson's reply to people, and they were unfailingly polite. And people, as he said, were very grateful to get the information and thanked him for, but I think some people put out the wrong information about not having done anything for the East Side schools. And then to compound the problem, Mr. Crabb, excuse me, repeated that. It did not, in my opinion, do his research before he put it out there and reinforced that belief. And if Mrs. Johnson hasn't sent it already to him, I am going to personally deliver this PowerPoint so that he can see that he should have checked with the district before he put that out there. So I think we have to, we are elected to make decisions. We had an extensive, robust conversation about this decision. Some of the people board members that disagreed with the purchase had ample time to express those disagreements. And then the people who were elected made the decision. And, that's what the decision was. Sorry, people felt like they weren't informed, but the school board definitely was informed. We had all of this information ahead of time. We knew what the price was going to be. And I, for one, just don't understand why there wasn't communication with the superintendent between the time that it was advertised and we knew the price and the day of the vote. Why was there all of this hullabaloo on the day of the vote when we knew far ahead of time? So that's my input on this. So
Here, can I say something? Since we're discussing, we don't get to discuss a whole lot. That's the beauty of workshops. So I didn't know when the property was advertised. I asked. So you don't know if we talked to the superintendent or not because we can't.
I heard that there was
I did speak to her. I spoke to the superintendent and she knew my dissension about it being too high. So, so I didn't come to the meeting just on May 5th with a dissension of that. Okay.
Okay.
And so the issue I have is with the process of how things were done. And I think the issue that the public has is with how the process was done. And the public, we can say all we want, everyone that I've spoken to, and I responded to emails also. I haven't shared them with my colleagues, but I responded to emails. If people take the time out to communicate with an elected official, I think we owe them that to at least respond to them. But folks that I've spoken with by email and out in public, it seems the major projects that we're doing that people can see are things in the West. So the SPAC was convened to cite a school site for an elementary school. And when this Sanders property was not available and we cited that property, the board voted to put the school on 24th and Parker Road. I don't think anybody else thought that there would be any land acquisition. Yes, it's in the ballot language. Technology is also in the ballot language. Ms. Johnson didn't go around making a hullabaloo about that. I don't even know what it's about. I was going to ask what type of technology expenditures. So I think the distrust and the folks feeling like it was a bait and switch is that there's been a lot more publicly made expenditures. But for me as a board member, the problems that I have with the land purchase is I have several. The appraisals. So I emailed the appraisals and I've read the state statute and it seems like anyone who does business with us, they are subject to public records and they're supposed to send us information on that, but that's another conversation. I also have issue with the RFQ or RFP 1920. Staff did not follow that document, it was issued. And I think this is I can discuss it now or I can discuss it in the next meeting, but I do have a question for Mr. Moore. He responded to me by email because I keep hearing we're exempt from that. I don't see an exemption in Rule 6A that says that professional services, as in real estate services, were exempt for that. The other issue I had, staff didn't even know how we were, or I keep getting different answers about how we were represented by Collier Internationals. We signed a 3-year agreement with Collier Internationals to represent the district, and I haven't gotten a straight answer. I've been told they're a transaction broker. I was told that Mr. Casso represented us and Dan Drodos represented the seller. I was told there was for sale by owner. These are important questions because shortly after that RFQ was issued and they responded and interviews were done, Ms. Suzanne Nguyen was talking a lot, sharing what the district said. So she's given him, the realtor team, information about properties we want. They can use that and not necessarily for our good. Because I feel that the real estate group ran the price of this property up and got the value up higher. Because if you look at the timeline of how things happened and transpired, shortly 4 months afterwards, it went from $1.8 million to over $3 million and no entitlements had been done. So I'm just coming at it from just a regular citizen and how you can read it. So yes, all of those emails I asked Ms. Hill for, and Ms. Hill shared with you all, I've gone through them and made a timeline. So I'm not spreading misinformation. I can show you and the citizens documents from our staff where the process was not done right. So my question to you all, and I'm going to keep asking it, if we didn't have to do the RFQ, why did we do it? Why did we do it?
That's a question for the attorneys.
Please answer then. Please tell me, someone. I wasn't expecting you to answer, Ms. Roy.
Mrs. Roy, can I speak after this? Can I speak, Ms. Roy?
Yes, sir, Dr. Paulson.
All right. After I voted to approve it, I met with people for about the next couple of weeks. Even you know about one of the meetings that we had. You asked for information, some of the board members.
I did. Yes, I did.
That's fine. But I mean, I had this on my mind, and up until the next meeting, nobody knows how I was going to vote. Nobody. The more I got into it and started peeling the onion, then I realized that this was a good vote. This is what I'm saying, though. You talk about 1.8, 3.6. You missed everything in between. What about the property down the street by Publix that went for $70,000 an acre? Oh, we forgot to say that. Now, you look at that. Let me finish. 140% of the 49,000 at the 1.8 million. You go 140% next, and you're up there to the next property. So that just conveniently gets left out. Conveniently. So, but like I said, I've been doing a lot of work too, Miss Certain. Then you sit there and, according to what we're hearing, we know there was a $4 million offer. But in the meeting with one of the realtors, they say those people come in high and then try to weasel out of it later on. But I won't mention that.
So you saw a $4 million offer? Did you see?
Yes, there was somebody.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't see that.
Yeah, well, it was told to us by somebody that your people that talk should know. So then the other thing is, according to what we're told, there's a $3.5 million offer on the table. So if we didn't get it, then that's when there would be, I think, a subdivision in there. You said there were no improvements, which I think is incorrect. I sold land for a pretty good amount of money 12 years ago. I made improvements and my property went way up. If they sat there and they were dividing this for 128 parcels, which could be a subdivision right away, that could have one of the reasons the property maybe went from the 2.6 million that, we just sold it for what another piece of property across the street, down a little bit down the street went, which was 2.6 if they had the acreage we had. And I ask you this, why isn't that ever told to the public? Why do we just tell certain things? Like tonight, we went from 1.8 to 3.6. We somehow missed 2.6. And that's a fact. Fact that that's just a fact, everybody. You even mentioned that to me last meeting because you said you knew about that last meeting.
$4 million piece. Yeah, I did know.
No, you knew about the 2.6 million because you said it last meeting. $70,000 an acre. But you left it out again tonight. So this is what I'm talking about. And if we're going to get along, and we need to get along for the good of our kids. Now, there have to be changes made. And I got into this really deep. We need some things even that we get back to people we didn't get back to. But then again, there's some people that didn't get back to us either. I know you must know that if you're into it as much as you say you are. So there was just a mess. Now, I think did you hear Mrs. McCann last night? She made a great thing. This is an unusual time we're in. We have so much going on and so much in this property transaction that, if somebody forgot to get back to somebody, it could happen. And we'll change those kinds of things. And what we got to do is, I was going to say this. I was a union president. Rocking the boat's great. Go ahead and keep rocking the boat. It's good to do that. But don't sink the boat. Because in that boat are going to be a lot of kids. And what happens? We all need to work together. Just like Dr. McNeely, excuse me, I almost called you Mrs. McNeely, Dr. McNeely. Just like Dr. McNeely, we got to get this settled. Because we got to get around to the business of helping our kids. We might want to buy that property at GHS, of course, everybody says we shouldn't have bought the other property because of the pandemic. So what do we say then when we want to buy the property at GHS? You say, well, we need it for the transition school. But again, if we go back to what was said about the pandemic, it makes it a little hypocritical. So I think this is, we need to look into these things. That might be great. It'll help us in the long run at GHS. I think it's a lot right now, what I'm hearing, the money is a little bit exorbitant compared to even the money we spent that everybody doesn't like at the other land. So, I mean, this is what I'm talking about, though. I mean, 1.8, we got an email the other night at a board meeting, went straight, we doubled the price. People hear that, they doubled it. But then there's property across the street that went right between it. And I don't know, I have to look, I didn't look up the date, but it'd be interesting if that was a year ago or something. And I went back, I've seen everything for a year and a half too. Yes, we need to do things to get better. And I'm going to do it. I know Rob's going to do it. I think you are, Dr. McNeely. You want to make this better. You want to make it so we can get on the business of educating our kids. I really believe that. And I know Mrs. Roy and Tina, I think, and I know you in your heart too, we all want to help the kids. I think we need to bring up these things that were just in my mind, it was conveniently left out. And why? Just like the other night, tell me why. Remember that email? Tell me why. Well, something that got me thinking. I'm saying, tell me why. Tell me why people left out all these convenient things. And that's just throwing it back in the same people who are throwing them in our face. But what we got to do, and I know I can see it now. This is, if I get on social internet, what do we? Paulson's bad, he doesn't want to help. Yes, I've been in this business 50 years. I love kids. All kids. So, and what I told people too, if we didn't buy that land, you talk about westward sprawl, it would have increased it because then it'd been a subdivision there right away. What do we do with those kids are going to have a school? And those are the kinds of things I told people. And they went, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. A lot of people, they didn't know the whole facts. And, I mean, and nobody's done anything. I've got into this thing pretty deep. I'm pretty good at digging into, I had all those arbitrations I had to do. And nobody did anything to try to do anything illegal. What happened was some people missed what they could have done as far as public relations. And we've got to build it up. And I understand what the, the oversight committee. Trouble we did with the oversight committee, we based it like we did, I think Mrs. Roy said a little while ago. We based it just like the oversight committee we had for the 1 mil. This is a different animal than the 1 mil. The 1 mil is not all this money in these projects. That was just a different animal. And we learned a lesson. But you know something? What about all the good things we're doing? Unbelievably good things. I hear that from our employees. Why don't they see we're doing good things? This is the biggest project in the history of Alachua County. There are some growing pains. That's how I explain it. There are growing pains. Let's get past this. Let's get people. We've got it out. I'm glad I got out. I had more, but I'm not going to mention anymore.
I guess I would like to ask you a question. You say that I left out something. I'm not telling the whole story. Tell me, what did I leave out?
It's $70,000 an acre.
That's mixed use. That's mixed use. It's a different zone. It's single family and mixed use.
It's $70,000 an acre. Why didn't you say something? Don't start. I mean, it was 70. If we bought that property for 70,000, then you're talking about 2.6 million. But
well,
it's not like
$4 million and it's more. But it's neither here nor there. But
I sold land.
One person speaking at a time. I think Dr. Paulson has the floor.
I sold land. I told you I sold land. And so these people went in and made improvements. Somebody might write me and say, you're crazy, Paulson. But, I hired a lawyer. We made the improvements necessary, and our property went way up. And then, seeing this, I thought the same thing. I sat in that meeting that, asked about. The superintendent gave everything was in the meeting. I thought that was very enlightening. And then I took all these in the think piece. I bet people thought I was going to go ahead and nix the deal. I was going either way. I didn't know what I was going to do. This is after the vote. And finally, I came to the point where, after seeing all I saw, it was a deal that we needed to make. Now, you can disagree with that. I remember I had, when we were hiring somebody, we had a violation of our school board policy. I wanted to table that vote. This was back a year, 2.5 years ago, something like that. I lost 3-2. Well, we just violated school board policy right there. I didn't like what happened. We lost 3-2, but then I lived with it because I was part of a school board. That's why. I don't always win, and then sometimes I lose.
I don't think, I'm sorry, go ahead. When you
I
finish.
mean, you don't always win. It's just that, I mean, just like this, how many we got? We got a standard email from about 100 people because I counted them. That's why I know. And then there were other people that a little more in depth. These ones that were standard, every one of them, why aren't we doing something for the east side of Gainesville? Well, we are. Plenty. And this money can't go to educate, the part of the education process. We established that too. But yet, so what happened? Why did we get something in an email? Who wrote that email is what I wonder, because it came from one place. And that's why, but I got back to a lot of people. And that's because I'm like you. I try to get back to people because we owe it to them. We work for those people. I know that. I just want this district, we have so much at stake that we cannot screw it up. That's all. If we all got to give in a little bit, hey, nothing wrong with that. Make mistakes. He said on March 30th, we got an email about that they had it. I think I don't have it in front of me right now, but it kept us up to date, and I think they had come to agreement. April the 27th, we were given the price 8 days before the meeting. Eight. Now, I don't know exactly, but I went that morning and I talked to the superintendent. She didn't try to tell me one way or the other. I just wanted to know positives and negatives because this was an important vote. Well, we were kept up to date on this. This was no surprise. And April 27th, the pandemic was going strong, wasn't it? So I didn't mean to get into all. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just couldn't help myself tonight. And I think I got most of it off my chest. I had like 10 things that I thought should have been mentioned. But I'm not trying to have an argument. I'm just trying to help us, so our district can get in the process of doing what we're supposed to do, educate our children and make our facilities and all our things we have for them better. And I think that's happening in our school district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. Ms. Certain.
Thank you. So I'll just come back and make a few points.
Sure.
Reiterate. I've stated why I thought the land cost too much and that we went in, but I believe in policy. So Dr. Paulson says we got a lot at stake and we don't want to screw this up. So that's why I'm going to go back to the policy of how staff secured the realtor services. I think that was done incorrectly. And I'm not getting, so Mr. Moore, would you please point to me in chapter 6A where it says realty services is exempt? That's my first question I want to address. If you have to look for that, that'll be fine. But then I want to take this to Ms. Clark. If we did not have to do the RFP, why did we do it?
Okay, you've posed these to Mr. Moore, but I'm just going to say that Mr. Delaney is also,
okay.
welcome to chime in. Thank you.
I'll start, and David, unless you want to, but so it's Rule 6A 1.012 from the State Board of Education, subsection 11A says that school districts are exempt from the competitive procurement process when hiring professional services. And then there's a list of potential or examples of different types of professional services. It's not an all-inclusive list. So commercial real estate realtors is not something that's listed, but nor is, I don't believe, a lobbyist, veterinarian. There's certain skilled professions that you need to get the person with the necessary skills. It's not simply a bidding process. And there's other skilled professions that are very specifically have to go through an extremely grueling process, like architects and engineers. And so there was no RFP, and it is so confusing for everybody because of all these acronyms.
Okay,
RFP, RFQ. RFQ can mean two different things. It can be a request for qualifications like we had here. There's also an RFQ that's a request for quotes. And so between $12,500 and $50,000, you have to request 3 quotes. But even then, you're not just opening it up. You can pick who the 3 you request the quotes are from. At 50,000 and above, you have to get sealed bids. There's all these different stages, and there's all these different
excuse me,
parameters
Mr.
to
Moore.
apply to certain things.
So
Sure.
I understand that. So what the sheet that we issued, 19-20, that had the things outlined, are you saying that we didn't have to follow that process? That's what I'm referring to.
Right. And I can't speak for Paul or Suzanne or whoever actually put that together, but I know that at the time, this is November of 2018, the focus was actually, I think, on GHS because Sanders had just been lost to us. It had just come under contract. But we needed a realtor to help with complicated issues like GHS. So there's property. Sometimes it's really simple.
Mr. Moore, what I'm trying to get to, I understand we need a realtor to buy property. That sheet that has 1920 that I emailed to you back, and they had things listed on there. Are you or Mr. Delaney telling me that staff sent that out to people, but then they didn't have to follow what's on that sheet? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I mean, I would like them to send something out and follow exactly what it says. That's always easier. That's a better way to do business. Yes. But I think it's the RFQ in this case is really just a title given to a process that could have been accomplished by making phone calls, getting referrals, talking to people who know experts, and get the recommendation. Who's a good?
So we sent something out to the public that says that we're putting this out, and we're going to for professional real estate services. And there's these things that these steps that we're saying have to be followed, but then we don't have to follow them. That's what you're telling me. That's okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't have it right in front of me right now. So
I emailed it to you.
I'm saying I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I have.
No, I mean, you've seen it. And so what I'm saying is that we sent something out for folks, for companies, potential real estate companies to respond to. And then you're telling me staff can just decide on a whim that they're not going to honor that cone of silence that it says it's in there. We're not going to honor the time period that you have to submit. If that's what you're telling me, I think we got even more problems. It's really concerning because when I look in the emails, it seems that Mr. Hackett thought we had to follow. You even thought we had to follow.
I did.
Yes. So it's just odd that we would send something out, and now you staff is sitting here telling me we didn't have to follow it. So and then the other thing, this is the other question I have. I don't know if my colleagues, if this makes them feel real good, that they can say the superintendent or her designee can then just say, we're going to look in the phone book and select a company to represent us. Because if I'm the company that didn't get selected, I'm going to have beef with it because it's going to seem like it's favoritism or there's something that goes along. So yeah, we're not paying out any money, but for a purchase, but in Collier's agreement, it says that if the seller doesn't pay the commission, then they're going to come to the board to pay the commission. And we also agreed for 3 years to allow Collier to represent us in any disposition of property. So that would mean the district would have to pay a commission. So I've got really, I've got some concerns that we would issue an RFQ, or that's what the paper was called. I know what you're saying, all the semantics, but that's what your staff, the superintendent staff issued that out. And it had things on it, and then we didn't follow the policy midstream. That's a problem for me. Because if you did it one time, it just makes me think that you did it several times. And if I'm a business person, then I don't feel like the district is doing business fairly with all vendors. So the perception is a whole lot. So, it doesn't make sense that we'd issue something and then change it midstream on a whim. So I don't understand that. Please explain that to me.
I believe that does Mr. White want to say something or not? Or,
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
thank you.
In our purchasing policies, it specifically says any expenditure under 12,500, you could simply get a quote, which we could have done. Interestingly enough, we thought, well, we'll do an RFQ to be transparent about this process. We did not have to do that, but we thought, well, let's find out who was out there. So we advertised, and we got the proposal. Now, what seems to be missing here is the recognition that the city actually sent a contract to Bosshart. Bosshart never returned the contract. We didn't have an agreement with Bosshart because they never returned a contract to us. And after that, then Collier's left. In terms of the issue that Ms. Certain raised in terms of representation, it's specific in the contract of Collier's. I don't have that contract in front of me, but that language, and I know Mr. Delaney read that in a meeting that we had concerning this whole issue. So it is in writing, it's in the contract in terms of how the representation would occur. And I believe that contract has been made available because we have public records requests for it. So the whole idea that somehow staff is nefariously trying to do something, I'm at a loss in terms of what benefit staff would get out of that. But we were simply trying to move the process along in what we thought was an open way. Now, after Collier's left, then the question was, what do we do now? Because the reason Bosshart was selected was based on that group. That group was no longer with Bosshart. And so then we talked about it and we asked for updated proposals and then we moved forward. You know, I think it concerns me that all the implications are where staff is trying to do something wrong. And I take issue to that. My staff is not going to do anything intentionally. We're not going to make any intentional misstatements. And I think when you look at the emails, we asked for direction, we asked council, we asked purchasing how we should proceed on that. And so we just simply did it. So.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. White, I looked at the emails and Mr. Drodos is the one who canceled the meeting with Bosshart. So he was leaving. So I guess that's why he canceled, but that's neither here nor there. But in the Collier's contract,
the contract was sent to Bosshart.
Yeah, and then
Bosshart.
Yeah, they did some backwards and forth, and there was some about a lot fingerprinting and things of that nature that the district, they didn't want to have to do because they didn't have that type of contract. But then the follow-up meeting to discuss the last things that was canceled by Mr. Drodos, they said they didn't need to have a meeting. So, but the Collier's contract, let's go back to that. It says we agreed that they can represent us, the seller, the buyer, or both in the same transaction. That's what we signed, the 3 years, because I even asked Mr. Delaney about it. I copied it out and I copied that paragraph out. It was in the miscellaneous paragraph. So, and then if they were working for us, the only problem I have is I don't care who we hire. I'm just thinking if a realtor is working for me, that they would not take a document to the appraiser and say, oh, we have this contract, so this is what you can use to value the land. That's working to me in the favor of the seller. So that was the thing that just kind of looked bad to me. And then I felt that district staff didn't know how we were being represented, because when I asked you, who were they representing? You told me the seller paid the realtor. And I responded that who pays the commission has nothing to do with representation. So I'm not trying to say staff did anything nefarious as if they did it intentionally, but to me, if we send a policy out and say, or a proposal out, we're asking for folks to respond to some type of service that we're trying to secure. As a school district, I don't think that an organization that we should change midstream. if that's what we send out, we should hold ourselves to that. And we didn't do that. And I think by not holding ourselves to that paper, it was that 2-page document that I have as part of the public records request, we put ourselves at a disadvantage because we started immediately speaking. That's just my personal opinion. So
again, we did not receive a contract. The principles on which the award was based left. So then we went through a process to review those again. So based on direction from the attorney's office and purchasing. And so we moved ahead. So in terms of the appraisals, you know what, one of the things that Dr. Paulson was referring to, D.R. Horton's offer was $4 million. If you do the math, at 30,000 for the first number of parcels and 34,000 for the next. We had an appraisal done earlier. One of the things that people are missing is that this was a OPD that expired. It would normally go back to an ag designation. The fact that the zoning changed, that you can now do residential development, increase the value, increase the highest and best use. That's happened if you look in the city of Gainesville near the university. When they changed the densities, the value of the property went up. It's the same thing. So, you know, you had an offer for 4 million, you had 3 appraisals around 3.5, where everybody says that, oh, we paid too much. I don't know.
okay.
And when you look
that third appraisal up,
at real estate, Ms. Certain, and the fact that there's an urban boundary, that in itself is going to increase the value of property there because it's scarcer, because you can't go outside the urban boundary and get utilities. So all of these are factors. Based on the workshop, February 4th, on strategic property acquisition, and the board saying move forward, staff did that. If the board had said, no, we don't want you to do anything, we wouldn't have done anything. So staff is following board direction. It was then advertised for 30 days starting April 4th.
Well, actually, staff did a whole lot of work before they even came to board and asked for stuff. When you look at the email,
Supposed to do a whole lot of work before we come to the board.
there was a whole lot of work and a whole lot of talk and all of that. So we'll disagree, and we'll have to just walk forward and try to regain the trust of the public and regain the trust of board members, certain, because from the emails that I saw where the dealings with Mr. Drotos asked, writing the letter to you, telling you to send it to the seller, the appraisal that was done and just put away, you said the price that they came back was a bridge too far, and then to come back now and you're justifying and saying the price is okay, that just doesn't seem, it doesn't sit well with me. So we'll go forward. I'm not for hurting kids, but at the same time, as myself and other citizens and the oversight committee said, that it's the confidence of a lot of people have been lost in just in how it was done. So
thank you, Ms. Certain, and thank you, Mr. White, for that explanation.
Ms. Roy, if I may.
Sure.
Ms. Certain, if her original question or the comments really had to do with the process. And so I just wanted to respond to that briefly. That I think Mr. White explained why they moved forward with that RFQ, but I've also had internal conversations with staff that no, we did not have to do that, but we did. And if you're going to do that, then yes, we must follow the process along the way. So while I think you acknowledge and Mr. White acknowledged that there was no ill will in there or anything of that sort, we have had those discussions that if we were to undertake something like this again and need to move forward in an RFQ process, if we don't have to do the process, either we do it or we don't do it. But either way, we have to do it correctly. So yes, we acknowledge that, and we have had those internal discussions already.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Well, I was glad to hear Ms. Certain say that there was nothing nefarious about what happened.
I don't know because
So I'm just quoting you. So are there any other board members that think that there was something nefarious going on in this transaction?
No,
Mr. Hyatt?
I don't know so.
Mr. Hyatt, I don't know, because the stuff that Ms. Certain and Mr. White and Attorney Moore, I didn't hear from Attorney Delaney, and I really want to hear from him because he's in the midst of this for us, and Brian is for the school district. But there is caution from what I'm hearing from Mr. White and from Mr. Moore that you, and now the superintendent, that in the future, whatever we put out there, we need to do. That's after the fact. White should already know that. And Attorney Moore and Attorney Delaney as well. Whatever they are talking about here, because I'm a little bit confused as the requests for qualification, requests for the other one. What is it that Mr. White is talking about that did not occur, but yet we stated it or sent it out in writing? What is it, Mr. White? Unmute him, Brian.
I don't understand the question.
My question is, what is it that Ms. Certain is referring to that we did and that the superintendent just said in the future, you know, we've learned a lesson and in the future we will do better at that? What is she talking about? Mr. White?
Well, I'd like to
White, Mr. White, I want him to answer.
So we talked about improving on the process. When I did not really hear from Bosshart from 2019 to 2020. The communication back to them indicating that another firm had been selected did not occur. There were some cut and paste issues on the agenda items. Those kinds of things need to be cleaned up. I can only assume that's what we're referring to. I'm happy for the superintendent to clarify.
Well, could I just say, and then if after what I say, anybody wants to continue the discussion, I would like to, I was very encouraged to hear Mrs. Certain say that she did not want to hurt kids. None of us do. And that she wanted to move forward. And we would disagree. Yes, we will have disagreements. But what I want to verify right now is maybe there were minor errors made, but I want to have our attorneys and Mr. Delaney as well to tell us that the district did nothing illegal, unethical, or immoral in this decision, this contract. If there were small errors, then maybe that happened. Everybody has said we learned a lot through this agreement that we have with buying this land deal, but I do not want to leave the public with the impression that the school district did something illegal or unethical, because I'd just like our attorneys to chime in on that, please.
Madam Chair, if I may, I've been
Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Times and would like to respond. I was not involved with these issues as they were happening in real time. I've only taken up and looked into the issues starting about a month ago as we were going up to the board vote regarding the land acquisition. But based on my review, what you said, Madam Chair, is correct. I have not seen any violations of Florida statute. in the way this company was selected to represent us or in the transaction itself. I just don't see anything in the paper trail that I have reviewed that would reflect illegal conduct or something that would make it in violation of Florida statute for the board to go through with this transaction. In response to Dr. McNeely's question and Ms. Certan's question, I understand what Mr. White has been describing, and I agree with Mr. Moore's analysis that under the Florida Administrative Code, there's not a specific requirement when you are securing the type of professional services that are included with being a real estate professional. That is not the type of services that are specifically required to be done through a RFQ or even an RFP. I think that the regulations and the statutes are silent as to that, which gives a school district the discretion to go about the process as it sees fit. I think this was an unusual situation in that a selection process was undertaken and two things happened. One, Bosshart was selected and a contract was sent to them and it never came back signed to complete that deal. And close in time to that, the talent, the people that were supposed to be working with the school district in these real estate transactions left Bosshart. So I understand with that sort of perfect storm of events, I understand why staff, including Mr. White, thought it would be appropriate to say we need to get some more qualifications sent in. We need to hear from some additional companies to see how we want to handle this kind of unusual situation. So I think that that's the process that unfolded. I think it was unfortunate in the sense that it was kind of an unusual situation that occurred. And to follow up with the superintendent's comment, Ms. Certan's comment, I think that we were less than clear as a district in some of the paperwork that we sent out in referencing things like cones of silence and RFPs, which we were not required to do by Florida statute or by regulation. My recommendation, after having spoken with some of the board members and the superintendent and looking at the situation over the past month, is that, and I think that's included in the presentation later, is that Mr. Moore and I worked to reach out to some other districts throughout the state and talk to their facilities departments about best practices on land acquisition and specifically building contracts. This is a $260 million tax initiative. There are going to be a lot of projects in this district over the next decade, and it's going to be at a tempo that this district has never seen before. And I think that the facilities department here in Alachua County probably needs some support in that regard. And I would recommend that Mr. Moore and I try to put together a playbook, if you will, some best practices and some standardized steps that would assist staff along with some training to smooth out some of these problems that have been identified.
Madam
Thank
Chair.
you so much. Yes,
Ann
Mr.
Wynn
Moore.
was asked if she was asked if she could speak, Ms. Wynn. I don't know if that's appropriate now or if you want to.
Of course, of course.
Attorney Delaney, before Mrs. Wynn comes on, I
Yes.
want to thank you for accepting and trying to answer the evidence that something between you and you, meaning Moore, the attorney, and you, Delaney, the attorney, that the two of you need to get together to help our facilities group, because it's evident by what you just stated that something you're not pinpointing, but they need help. And that's all that's all I want my colleagues to say and to acknowledge. They need help. And if the two of you can get together to do that, to help, because there will be rapid changes in our system. They need the help. They certainly need the legal help, because there's something that transpired in all of the paperwork that y'all are talking about. Something was missing. So if you can do that and assure the five of us who you work for, the five of us, then I will feel better. Brian works for the district, you work for us. And so I need that kind of help, support, and reassurance that you will do that.
Thank
Well,
you. And if I may, Madam Chair, just
Sure.
respond briefly. Thank you, Dr. McNeely. I certainly don't mean to imply that that our facilities staff is not dedicated and not
No,
hard
you didn't
working.
say that. You said they need help. Isn't that
Yes,
what
ma'am.
you said? Isn't that
Yes,
what you
ma'am.
implied? Yes, they need help. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm agreeing with you. And I think that what I have proposed in terms of providing some more support or some more help to the facilities department, particularly with the scope of the undertakings that we are going on. This is a complicated area of the law. There are a lot of steps involved with procurement on projects of this size. We want to make sure that the public is reassured that their tax dollars are being well spent. So yes, ma'am, I do
And
think
if
it would be
that's not
appropriate.
your law expertise, or Brian, then you need to hire someone who has that expertise. We have the money.
I think it is his expertise.
I
but
don't
thank
know.
you,
I didn't
Dr.
hear Delane. I didn't hear David saying that.
What I would say is a reasonable first step is Brian and I, with the support of the board and the district, we're very closely involved with the Florida School Boards Attorneys Association. So we've got a network of professionals from around the state that we can reach out to in Orange County or Flagler County, where they were on a building spree, in Miami-Dade, and we can talk to their legal teams in those areas. I certainly feel comfortable operating in this area, but I think that we want to operate at a very high level, and we want to be implementing the best practices. And Brian and I are well positioned to pick the brains of the best and brightest and the folks who do this day in and day out. And I think that that's something that we can put together for the district.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. I hope we can agree to move forward on this and, understand that nobody is perfect. People are imperfect. And I think, I don't know if Ms. Nguyen still would like to speak, but if she would like, of course.
But I would like to speak. This is Suzanne Wood. I'm the Director of Community Planning. I'm the one that issued the document in question. First of all, I would like to say I'm very thankful and appreciative for the counsel of our legal team that will happening in the future. I wanted to assure everyone that the fundamental intention was good. Hindsight's 20/20 always. Even though we could have gone to the phone book to pick a realtor service, staff felt, and we had the intention, I know I had the intention, to give an unbiased opportunity to realtors. Even though the district was not going to be paying a commission, there was a significant commission to be made. So we wanted to give that opportunity. So we created a process as best we could. We received proposals from Front Street and Bossart. We reviewed the proposals. We had a committee. We had interviews. We ranked them. We sent a contract to Bossart that was never executed. I believe that it was the perception of staff that at that point, that process ended. And at that point, it was, what do we do now? Consulted with purchasing and legal, with our legal staff, and we moved forward with, again, what we perceived to be as fair a process as possible, where we got new proposals from Bossard, Colliers, and Front Street, and went through that process with them. I think the perception was the cone of silence, everything that was referenced in that document that I issued, it sounds like it should have never been issued. The perception of that ending happened when Bossart didn't return their contract. So I apologize profusely for, the intentions were good. That's all I wanted to say. So thank you for letting me speak.
Ms. Roy, one more thing.
Fine.
Ms.
Gwen,
Roy?
thank you. Yes, sir, Dr. Paulson.
I don't want to get into it because,
Good.
it's all, but I want this said. This was a highly unusual situation. Highly unusual. So not only all this other stuff going on, probably you'll never see another situation like this. It's all I can say. And so, no more than that. I mean, think about it. It just was unusual for what happened. And our staff was put in a situation that I don't know if there is a playbook for, in all fairness to them. And they weren't doing anything. They weren't trying to break the law. They're trying to do the best they can, but they faced a situation that was highly, highly, highly unusual. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paulson. Well, I think we have had a discussion. We didn't actually finish, I don't think, the facilities update. I don't know if Mrs. Johnson wants to continue. I mean, we've all read it for sure, but I'll turn it back to her and see what she has to say.
Actually, Madam Chair, the next section was going to be Mr. Rella's.
Okay.
A bit of financial information. I think some of it he covered in his earlier part of the presentation. And then the last part was the timelines, which we've kind of gone through a lot with the issuance of the RFQ, the letters, the three kind of different stages of the Sanders world, the SPAC status until it became off market, then the small blip in time where maybe it's back on market, but came back with the appraised value in February, and then the realtor team that we picked changed companies. And then it kind of died off. And then several months later, it came back to, I think we've kind of gone through all that and the process. And so I don't know if you want me to walk through that or just get to the last slide where the superintendent has the moving forward. And I will tell you also that Pastor Smith, the chair of the oversight committee, has been waiting for citizen input since about the very first second of the meeting.
Dear.
If we want to switch to him and start citizen input just because of the sheer level of patience that he's demonstrated today, we could do that. So I don't know if you want me to go to the last slide or just go to Pastor Smith, or what would you like me to do?
Let's hear from Pastor Smith, if that's agreeable to everyone.
It is, yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Pastor Smith?
We want to switch to him.
He's going to be watching on YouTube too, so he's going to be behind.
Level of today. We could do that. So I don't know if you want me to go to the last slide or just go to
Wait till
Pastor Smith, or what would you like me to do?
Let's hear from Pastor Smith, if that's agreeable.
Pastor Smith, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so if you can mute the YouTube, you're like 20 seconds ahead in our world than on the YouTube channel. So, and we know you've been waiting an awfully long time, but I'd like to let you know you're on with the board right now.
We can do that. So I don't know if you want me to go to the last slide or.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, board members, Madam Superintendent. This is Carl Smith. This is Carl Smith, and this is Carl Smith. And I serve.
Smith, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to start over. But you need to turn down the background, the YouTube video.
Okay.
I'll wait till there's quiet because we're hearing you twice and you're hearing us twice.
So is this better? I've turned it down.
Yes.
That sounds perfect. So I'm going to start over and you can start over and have the floor. It's all yours.
I'm going to start over first. Turn down the background YouTube, please.
So again, good afternoon, board chairman, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, Carl Smith from the Oversight Committee. I have sat through the entire meeting today and appreciate the discussion that we've had, but I wanted to do a couple of things. One, the Half-Cent Oversight Committee met on Monday, our regularly scheduled meeting. So again, good afternoon, board chairman, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, Carl Smith from the Oversight Committee. I have sat through the entire meeting today and appreciate the discussion that we've had, but I wanted to do a couple of things. One, the Half-Cent Oversight Committee met on Monday, our regularly scheduled meeting. Good afternoon, board chairman, members of the board. And during that meeting, the Oversight Committee
I'm sorry to
had
interrupt you.
lengthy discussion about not being informed about the details of the Jonesville land acquisition prior to the transaction, and has neither endorsed nor not endorsed the transaction. But a significant portion of our meeting was devoted to ensuring that the Oversight Committee be properly engaged on major purchases going forward, and Superintendent Clark took responsibility to make that happen. The Half-Cent Oversight Committee values transparency and is committed to serving the Alachua County Public School System, its students, and our community. We feel that the ballot language is clear, and we're committed to working with the board and the administration to be effective stewards of the responsibilities entrusted to us. We also want to note that we have changed our meeting to the second Monday so we don't conflict with the Children's Trust meeting. And our next meeting will be the second Monday in August, which is August the 10th. And then I'd like to request a written response from the board to share with the committee during our next meeting regarding this statement. We've got to work better together. I don't think the ballot language suggested either or, that we work better together. And by being informed, we can help the board and the administration move forward in the very positive progress we're trying to make to have all Alachua County schools, our system, become a world-class education system. Please respond and let's work better together. Thank you.
Pastor Smith, thank you so much for your gracious remarks. Thank you.
That we work better together.
This feedback.
Is there anyone else to speak, Mr.?
No,
Moore?
Madam Chair, there haven't been any other calls.
Okay.
And given the amount of time that we had, I mean, we can give another 15, 20 seconds. We did jump straight into citizen input. And with the delay on YouTube, if we want to give a little bit more time, if you want, I can pull up the last slide, the moving forward, although I think Pastor Smith just kind of covered half of it right there. So I don't know. It's after 5. It's your call.
Well, let's just take a look at the moving forward slide, if you don't mind. I mean, we'll tie it up soon if there's no more citizen input or board discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore, and thank you, Madam Chair. So, the board has spent about 3 hours this afternoon receiving a lot of different information on a lot of different topics. And obviously there was some very robust discussion on the property purchase, but also the facilities update. And I appreciate Pastor Carl's comments. Pastor Carl and I had an individual discussion several weeks ago, and then also a very robust discussion with the Oversight Committee on Monday. And they actually received this same presentation. All of you were emailed the presentation on Friday. It just so happened that the half-cent committee meeting was prior to this workshop. So they have seen this as well. So as we moving forward, I think has been kind of what I've heard from many of the board members that, where do we go from here? I've heard staff acknowledge, you heard from Suzanne, you heard from Mr. White, you've heard from me, that yes, were there some missteps along the way? Yes. Was there any ill will or ill intent by any of our district staff? No. But moving forward, number one is that we have to improve our communication. This bullet point speaks specifically to the half-cent oversight committee, but I would also suggest that we are improving that communication out to our constituents, parents, community members, board, staff, etc. And so we've talked about how we can improve those ways that we are. One example, just for the public, is as it stands right now, that dashboard looks amazing. But if I'm someone that doesn't have a child in school and I'm not, I don't really know one school as opposed to the other, there was really not one link or one master list of kind of where we were with projects right now. And so instead of the public having to go through 40 different school sites, they can go to one list. And that is something that's going to be active. So wherever we are in the process, that's going to be there, but then also what's on the horizon. And that's information moving forward with the half-cent oversight committee. As Pastor Carl mentioned, they are going to increase the frequency of their meetings. They were meeting quarterly. They asked to meet every other month. And a piece of that, of every meeting, obviously is the budgetary discussion where we review expenditures, but also we're going to provide information on progress on projects as it results to budget. So where are we, the status of the work, but also the budgetary impacts of that work. Are we over budget? Are we under budget? Where are we? Are we on time with the project? So that the oversight committee has that information. And what I've also asked staff to do, to even include those projects that will have either a blended capital outlay funding source or a regular capital outlay funding source, that while that's not their direct oversight, many folks don't necessarily separate the two. They don't separate multiple funding sources. So at least for an awareness of those projects, even though that's not on their direct oversight, I think that was good information that they needed to have as well, because their citizens may speak with them directly and want that information. And so that information we will also be providing directly to the board. So you will have that exact same information that the half-cent oversight committee would be receiving in their format. Now, obviously, purchase orders and contracts and all those things still come to the school board for approval until you have that documentation. But this would be another avenue of communication for the board and the half-cent oversight committee. The other thing that we're going to be doing, because there is even now, even though it's shorter, there is still time between meetings, all of the agendas and backup information for any of those half-cent projects would be emailed directly to committee members. So they don't need to go to our website, every 2 weeks to look, is there a project or a facilities project on the agenda? We're going to send that information to them in advance again, so they will be aware for things that are happening potentially between meetings that they want to be in touch with, but also if there's questions from citizens. We also want them to receive direct invitations to all of the board workshops on facilities related issues. We invited all of them to tune in to the workshop today. Once we return to a more traditional format, we will still continue to send those invitations if they're able to be physically present in those workshops. As Mr. Delaney mentioned, there are some school districts that have had half-cent initiatives like this for some time. And there are bigger districts that have, entire real estate departments that the districts fund, which, we're not large enough to have that. But look at those best practices of other districts and look at those real estate procedures. Again, it doesn't, we may not be buying a whole lot of property in the future, but it's certainly something we need to make sure we have in place moving forward. And then the last two deal with budget and making sure we are closely monitoring project costs. And monitoring those financial data and projections. One thing that we have said from the beginning, and my direction to staff, was to be very conservative in those expenditures and what we are budgeting for in the beginning, because what we don't want to have happen is that we come in so far over budget on all these projects, and then schools that are towards the end of the sales tax initiative would not get projects done. So there's a very healthy holdback that we have put into place so that we are going to be able to do that. I did not want us to overpromise. And so that is something that I've been very clear with staff about as that project list was developed. And that's something we want to make sure we do, because we want to make sure that we are able to complete all of these projects at all of our schools. And at the end, I'd love to be pleasantly surprised that there's money left that we can tackle some other projects that were not a part of the project list initially, that come year 13 when we're done, are there other things that we can do? But again, I think that the overarching theme here is communication. When we drill down to it, communication is the root of all of this. And I want to make sure that for me personally, from my office, from district staff, with our vendors, we have to improve that communication. I've already had multiple discussions with different departments, not just facilities, but multiple departments, about how do we improve that communication moving forward, and how do we make sure that that the board is informed on what we're doing in a very timely fashion. And especially with the sales tax, with so many projects coming to the board, there's pretty much a facilities item on pretty much every agenda, and there will be from now on for a long time. But again, communication is key. And that's something that I, as the leader of the organization, have to ensure. And I have to make sure that our department heads are following that as well. And then, of course, staff members in those departments. So that is my commitment, and my pledge to the board, my pledge to the community, my pledge to the Half-Site Oversight Committee, and to staff, that that's what we're going to do. We are going to improve our communication. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Yes, we've had quite robust and honest discussion from everyone, and I so appreciate everyone's honesty and forthrightness in discussing this. Is there any further remarks? Or I want to thank Pastor Smith especially, because he kind of brought peace here, I think, at the end, I hope. And so.
Madam Chair, we did get 2 callers while the superintendent was calling, so there are
Okay.
2 more citizens that got time to call in. And if they're in the waiting room in the right order, this should be Carly Simon that I'm admitting. Let me unmute her. Ms.
Okay.
Simon, do I have you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so go ahead. You are on with the board.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start with, I still have questions based on this workshop. So first question would be, why were 3 appraisals performed when there is only a requirement for 2 appraisals by the state, and the 2 appraisals have a lifetime of 24 months? I found this out through DOE when I emailed them about this. So I'm unclear why a 3rd appraisal happened. On top of that, that 3rd appraisal specifically, this is the last appraisal that occurred in December. The real estate agents that the district signed the contract with through Colliers, one of them, Dan Drodos, it was noted in the 3rd appraisal that he had submitted this D.R. Horton letter of interest that had already expired to the appraisal, which it appears that that would benefit the seller and actually not benefit the buyer. So I really would like to know how the board feels about that, and actually how the staff feels about this, considering we're now in a 3-year contract with them. On top of that, I know that Paul White sent an email to Dan Drodos, frustrated back in February 2019 that entitlements were included in the 1st appraisal. What made Paul White change his mind and decide that it was acceptable to pay for these entitlements that the school district did not need? And in fact, at that appraisal, the entitlements weren't even done yet, because those were things that were going to be happening later. So I would like some clarification on that. I think the discussion about the oversight committee, I think this is how the school district and the board can build trust, is by making sure that citizen input is involved. And I think the language that right now is being used for the oversight committee is not acceptable. And this is going to have other impacts for other future levies, that if citizens do not feel that the Oversight Committee actually is overseeing these processes, citizens will not trust the fact that their money is going to be used in this way. I understand this component about unprecedented times. I think also when we're in unprecedented times, that's when we amp up our due diligence, and that's also when we slow things down. So if things were unstable, this is not the time when we make very large purchases in unknown situations. And I still feel that that's the case. I also then would like to point out that I'm disappointed with the defensiveness of certain board members. I think you are now in a situation where the burden is on the board and the staff to regain the trust of the community. And that's going to happen with due diligence. And so I do not think this is the time to stop doing RFQ processes or our RFP processes. It's actually a time for you to increase your policies and procedures so that the citizenry feels that there is a series of mechanisms in place to make sure that these monies are used appropriately.
Ms. Simon,
It's going to take time.
3 minutes, if you could wrap up, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to take time. I mean, I have this conversation with my child all the time. When trust is threatened, it's going to take more work to build it back up. And this, I appreciate the superintendent pointing out the things that she's going to do. I really hope the board also takes some consideration and thinks about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
And now let me get, this should be Ann Katurba. Let me make sure, I have to unmute her first. Dr. Katurba, is that you?
Yes, it is, Mr.
Okay.
Morris.
Thank
Am
you.
I on?
Yes, you're unmuted and you are on with the board now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. This is a little awkward, so I'm sorry, but I've looked at literally hundreds of emails and have put them in order. And some of the stuff that was said at this workshop, I just wanted to clarify how my impression of this was and some of the things that were said. Let's go back to the SPAC committee. I'd like anybody to go back and look at some of the documents that were associated with the SPAC committee meetings, and you will see that one engineer and one engineering company actually looked at this property not knowing that it was under contract at that time and thought that even at $50,000 an acre, that was a high price for a school site. But fast forward to the RFQ being put out in November, and then the interviews were done on January 14th, two companies, Front Street and Boshart. What was talked about was, well, I don't know what was talked about. Actually, I wasn't there. However, shortly thereafter, land negotiations started on the 37 acres. And anybody who wants to look at the emails can look at them. There was actually, by January 31st, there was a letter of interest that Dan Drotos had drafted for Paul White to send to the seller of that property based on appraised values. No, and that's why the Emerson appraisal got done, to establish value, because the district staff were actively negotiating for that property. When that appraisal came back at $3.5 million, I don't know what happened, but it seemed like some of the discussion was that it was too high a price. And so that ended up stopping. Now, when Dr. Paulson talked about how did it just jump from 1.85 to 3.5, it actually did. It jumped, the appraised value, it was it was a bank loan for the sale to Peter Trematera. And 2 months later, it was 3.5 million, but that was based on entitlements that weren't there, that the school district really didn't need. When Dr. Paulson talks about the commercial property across the street at 70,000 an acre, that closed actually in 2020. It was a recent sale. It came down from 6 to 4 million, I believe. And that's a totally different class. The zoning really matters for price per acre. That was commercial and mixed use. You can't compare the two. Finally, when we're talking about a $4 million contract, that's a contract that D.R. Horton walked away from. They did not buy it. We don't know why, but that isn't fair to use that as a comp. Finally, I just want to address the comments that Boshart Realty did not return the contract. That is a total simplification of what happened. And as Mrs. Certain tried to say, the reason that Boshart didn't keep in the game was because Dan Drotos, who was going to move to Colliers, told them to cancel the meeting that had been scheduled with the attorneys to discuss it.
Dr.
And they actually did update.
No, it's been
Yes.
over 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. So I don't get to
Go
talk
ahead, please
anymore?
finish. I don't mean, this is hard. I have to
Okay,
interrupt.
I'll finish. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say that Boshart did return an updated proposal. Collier created an entirely new proposal, and that was assessed on June 18th. So I just wanted to correct the idea that Boshart never returned the contract. There was a good reason for that, and actually Collier didn't use your contract either. There was a lot of negotiation on that too. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. All right. I think we've discussed this to death.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Wright. We did get one more caller.
Okay.
And they called the other line, so we did get to keep both of our operators. This is Sandy Parker. Let me bring
Of course.
Sandy Parker in. Hello, Sandy Parker?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. You are on with the board now. Go right ahead, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to chime in. I've been following this entire situation fairly closely for the past, I don't know how long it's been, a month or two or 6 weeks. And as we have gone along this entire process, as School Board Member Paulson said, this was a very unusual situation. Well, he said that today, but over the past 6 weeks, it seems like we have been being told by the majority of the board that all this is normal. Everything is normal. The fact that the price is doubled was normal. The fact that the buyer and the seller is represented by the same person is normal. And then we found out later, oh, that wasn't actually what was happening at all. So we, the public, have been seeing the story change as time has gone on. And then today we come to the point where the lawyers are saying, yeah, we need to follow some best practices. And the school board members are saying, yeah, this was unusual. So another thing that we have noticed at home is a lot of umbrage taking and defensiveness from school board members when they have been questioned or the staff has been questioned. And I understand you want to protect your staff, but at the same time, the staff is accountable to you and you are accountable to us. We're your auditors in a sense. I come from the accounting world and I may trust my staff, but I'm going to have to turn around and show my work to somebody. And I better be sure my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed. And I don't think that this happened here. And so while everybody is coming together and looking to move forward, I applaud that. But please, a little less umbrage taking and annoyance and a little more respect for people who are questioning this expenditure of taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
The first speaker asked many questions. Does that mean that Mr. White will answer all those questions through an email or at our next meeting? Or how will you have him to answer? Because none of us can answer it. He's the only one that can. He's the assistant superintendent of operations. So he needs to answer. We cannot allow this to go on for 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, and it's not settled. There were specific, I wrote them down, all of the questions. Ms. Peck probably has them as well. But how is he going to respond to those very important questions? I even want to know what the answers are.
Ms. Clark, do you want to address that?
Sure. So I'm not sure if Mr. White, is he still, I don't know if he's still, oh yes, he's still on the call.
He's still on.
I was just checking because I've got so many boxes up here. And I don't know if some of these questions would all be asked by Mr. White or Mrs. Nguyen. So what I would recommend is that I have, I believe I have Dr. Simon's email address, and I can have Mr. White, Ms. Nguyen, the facilities staff answer those questions and send that, and then we can copy the board on the response. Absolutely.
I think you need to copy the public because it was a citizen comment. It was very much in line with what we've been discussing all day. And I'm going to wait for Suzanne and Paul to answer, but the public needs, how does the public get to hear when they've been on with us today?
Okay, well, I think we know.
Hadn't finished answering, Chairman.
Right. So I have no way to copy the public, Dr. McNeely. Generally, we don't, generally those discussions, when the citizens make those comments, we email that. So we could email that and then give the information publicly at the next board meeting. We could certainly do that. I mean, I don't really have a way to copy the public per se on that, but we can do it both ways.
But this really wasn't a board meeting, and I thought it was a workshop. Are we out of the workshop?
No, this is a workshop, but generally when we have speakers and citizen input, although we don't have the forms on a virtual meeting, we generally have them fill that out with their contact information, then we provide that information. Now, if Mr. White and Ms. Nguyen in conjunction are ready to answer those questions right now, we can do it. If not, I could have them email Dr. Simon, so she has that right now, and then we could answer them publicly at our next board meeting, because that's the next time everybody will be all together, is at the next board meeting. And so we could do it both ways.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark.
I like the first thing that you said, Karen.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Dr. McNeely has made a request. Mrs. Clark has answered.
So Mr. White, if I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if Mr. White is prepared to answer that question now, he can certainly do that and also respond via email.
Madam Chair,
yes, sir.
Recall, I guess the first question was about the first appraisal that was done, and I asked questions about the entitlements, and I did, and we did that appraisal early on, and the timing of that was really at the front of our initiatives, and we had not gotten far enough along on all the projects that are coming online now. So that's why we didn't proceed in getting a second appraisal on that. In terms of the entitlements, as I looked into that, when you look at the property, it's generally sold for its highest and best use. So if I have a piece of property and its highest and best use is X, and I say, well, I'm going to use it for Y, that doesn't change the value in the mind of the seller. So after that, and I guess I can't recall whether the property was off the market at that point or not, but it was off the market. So we really forgot about it until we were noticed that it did come back on the market. Now, my understanding is that D.R. Horton did not walk away from the deal. My understanding is that the seller wanted all their money up front. The D.R. Horton deal was structured that half the parcels would be purchased, and then there would be a second phase of purchasing. So that was one of the reasons that I guess we looked more attractive, because we would pay the seller all the money up front. So from my recollection, that's why we proceeded the way we did. You know, you ask questions, you get answers, and then you move on.
Thank you, Mr. White. If there are no other discussion on this, any other discussion? I will close the meeting. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.